Call the meeting to order, and item 1.1, is there any items on tonight's agenda that give rise to pecuniary interest or conflict? Councillor Simpson? You?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll excuse myself for anything Civic Square or Fire Hall.
Thank you. That will be noted. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on. The agenda is before you. A motion to adopt the agenda is presented.
Mr. Mayor, are the two closed session agenda items, have those been added, or do we need to do that at this stage?
Okay, so we have 12.1 and 12.2. 12.1 is construction contract, fire hall renovation and expansion project, and 12.2 is the HR human resources update. So with those two additions, would anybody care to move the agenda as amended? Councillor Simpson? Okay, thank you. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and then we have no items up until 7.1 and budget presentation by Kyle Beauchamp.
Well,
the floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules tonight. So we do have the 2021 budget deliberations. We do have the capital and operating as part of this presentation here. So I'll kind of go through the presentation here. I'll pause for questions throughout the presentation, but if there's any time somebody has a question and I'm still talking, just raise your hand, yell at me. I will stop. Okay. So what's the intention of this budget meeting? Again, provide council with operational and capital budget projections. New projects, new requests, and financial projections will be presented to council for consideration and discussion. There's no formal approval required from council for this meeting. This is just, again, the preliminary budget deliberations. Based on council's feedback from this meeting, any adjustments or further requests made, capital and operating budgets will likely be brought back to council in December 2020 for approval. So the budget process, what is required of council under the MGA? So council must pass a 3-year operating plan and a 5-year capital plan under the MGA. This doesn't mean every year, though, that a brand new capital plan and operating plan has to be made. Rather, the plans are in place from previous years are generally just revisited and updated accordingly. So how does that affect this year's budget cycle? Well, last year we had the 2020 to 2022 operating budgets and the 2020 to 2024 capital budget. Both these will roll forward to this current year, and then they'll be updated for new changes and projections. So how does the town of Coaldale create the budget? So a little background here. The previous year's approved budget is always the baseline. Once we have the baseline, we look at trend analysis for revenue and expenses, how they actually compared for 2020 based on budgets. We then look at projections for possible changes and update those into the budget. So this initial process usually happens in September. In October, each department will review their budget with the Corporate Services Department, discuss new changes and requests to the budget. These changes are then added, reviewed to ensure consistency with Council's strategic plan into the draft budget. Once we have the draft budget, this document is reviewed between the Director of Corporate Services and the CAO. A special focus is placed on budget variances and new requests. Several adjustments usually occur at this phase based on priority need, industry requirements, and previously communicated strategic directives from Council. Following these collective efforts, preliminary budget discussions are held with Council in November. Finally, to get to the end product, generally we look for budget approval from Council in December of each year. The budget focus is on areas of priority need. In alignment with Council direction in areas of surplus or excess revenue from a previous year, it's only allocated to the operating budget if there's a priority need. there is no priority in need that does exist, the surpluses are generally allocated to capital reserve. Essentially, what we've told to the staff to kind of promote efficient spending is that if you don't spend it, those funds will be transferred over to their capital reserve for future year. So it eliminates the inefficient mindset of spend it or lose it. Rather, it focuses on if you don't spend it, save it for the future. The benefit of this council sanction approach is that Coaldale has been increasing the funds allocated to reserves each of the past 3 years without resorting to tax increases to do so. So when thinking of the budget and discussing this with residents and businesses and stakeholders, essentially with charging taxes, utility fees, and other charges, citizens and businesses receive various services. And the services they receive have an impact on the quality of life. So for example here, a resident with a assessed value of $300,000 on their property will pay an average of $210 a month in municipal taxes. I say municipal taxes because this excludes third-party requisitions such as education. So for $210 a month, what are some examples of what the property owner will receive? They receive access to parks, playgrounds, and other green spaces, snow removal, street sweeping, road patching, and infrastructure upgrades, emergency services such as fire and police, tax subsidized recreation facilities such as the arena, curling rink, spray park, pool, walking trails, and other recreation facilities. There's also community events such as Settlers Days, Night of Lights, access to the library, museum, and many more. So those are the kind of services that residents receive every month in return for paying their property taxes. And just kind of comparing that, what does that charge that they're receiving for property taxes equate to other things? A couple examples on the screen here. You know, what do you pay monthly for your cell phone, your car insurance, your home insurance, internet, a date night out, groceries, entertainment, travel? So I think it's important to, you know, when describing property taxes, nobody likes paying property taxes. That's fair. But I think there's a lot of value in it. If you can kind of compare what a resident and a business receives for their property taxes each year compared to some of the other expenses that they may have in their daily lives, it's important to show that the residents, there's value there and that they feel and recognize the value. So moving past the introduction here, talking a little bit about financial transparency. Since 2018, key focus has been on increasing the level of quality financial reporting to the public. So this includes creation of detailed budget documents, annual financial reports, and regular financial updates to council. These budget documents, annual reports, financial updates, and other financial documents are presented to council throughout the year, and they're also available online for all stakeholders to review. Corporate Services also distributes paper copies on request. Some props here. The town of Coaldale, as we've mentioned before, was recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA International, for the first time Coaldale has ever received the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting. This award is generally given to municipalities who produce high quality and financially transparent documents. So when I say these documents are always available for stakeholders to review, here's just kind of a snapshot from our website. There's financial statements, budget documents, annual reports, and other comparative reports here. These are always available for people to view. So in 2021, additional steps were kind of taken to continue the focus around corporate excellence. There was the implementation of Questica budgeting software. So Questica budgeting software is an online tool that administration has transitioned to allow us to prepare these budget documents and reports with greater ease. It's also another tool to provide more relative and information reports to council and the citizens as needed. We also have the implementation of Questica Open Book. So Questica Open Book is an easy to use, easy to access medium for the town of Coaldale to communicate financial and other information to the community. So the sense is we're not, this isn't acting as a deficiency for anything we weren't doing before. We're still sharing these quality financial reports and information, but we're giving the community an easier way to access and use it. So Questica Open Book isn't ready live yet, but I kind of want to show council a demo of what this will look like. So you can see here, this will be a Coaldale specific web page when it is completed. So we'll have town of Coaldale information on here, but again, this is just a demo. So I'm going to skip past the financial information for now because it allows us to put information about our budget, capital projects, year-to-date spending, essentially anything financial related we can put on here. It also acts as a medium for us to distribute so much more information than that to the residents. So as a demo here, you know, like Toronto, it talks about if you need to get tested for COVID, where can you go? So residents may click in here and it's very easy to use, right? Just a map. You know, if I click on a various sites, it's got information about where to go. Obviously not gonna have this for Coaldale, but it's just an example of the scope and ability that we can use. There's information, you know, Toronto's homeless shelter map, operating revenues, historical variances, urban crime stats. One of the coolest things I kind of like about this is the capital project feature. So residents can log on here, go to the capital projects and pull up a map of Coaldale. Each of these sections here kind of represents a capital project. So I'm going to go to the bike master plan. I click in here, it shows where in the city it's being built. We can put some pictures on here to kind of show residents what it will look like. And again, there's a fairly well and transparent description here about the project. Scrolling down here, it allows us to put dates of when the project's starting, when we think it'll end based on today's date, expenses, funding pools, impact to the operating budget. So when this goes live, we'll be able to put every one of the town's capital projects on here on a specific map where residents can see everything that's going on. So I've had some people say, hey, Eastview Park sounds really good, but where exactly is Eastview Park? If they look at this, hey, it's right here. Or, you know, there may be other capital projects that they don't know, like replacing the water pump at the lagoon station. It's another area that provides more relative information to the community. So this is currently in process. We're hoping to have it ready for the public early January here in the new year. So moving on into asset management. So significant progress has been made into the town's asset management program this past year. A few things that we've accomplished. We're near completion of the infrastructure and transportation master plans. Application for a $50,000 asset management grant was applied through FCSM. While the application is still being processed, we're hopeful for good news later this year or early next year. If accepted, this grant will help cover costs for staff training from industry experts and consultants. In addition to that program, we were recently accepted into the RMA AUMA Asset Management Cohort Training Program. Under this program, Town of Coaldale will work with other municipalities collaboratively and industry experts on training and gathering resources that we can compile and use together as we work on our asset management policies. Finally, significant work has been just about completed here in reorganizing the town's financial GL and tracking system. Part of this is we'll be able to better track different groups of cost for where the town is spending money. For example, with this data, we anticipate to be able to track how much does it cost to for the town to repave a road? How much does it cost to repave a sidewalk? All this information is crucial and important when determining implementing an asset management program, as it can better assign in-house costs to replacement of our town's various assets. So while for 2020 there's been a lot of work that's been done, the majority of the work accomplished has been surrounded on gathering baseline data of the town's current infrastructure. Again, that's based on the IMP, the Transportation Master Plan, and getting a better kind of understanding of the assets that we have, their useful life, and what it would cost to replace these. So now we kind of have that bank of library information. Going forward, it'll be how can we put that into the plan to put it on schedule to replace and update these assets as they're needed. Asset management isn't just an accounting buzzword, but it's a commitment and a buy-in from the town as a whole, that being staff, council. So as a result, how fast the asset management program goes will be dependent on the time and resources needed from the departments to pursue optimal progression of this project. So I've kind of talked about the infrastructure master plan already. Kind of the key, or some of the key projects identified in the infrastructure master plan, we're already doing as a town. For example, Main Street, the road and utilities replacement, this was recently completed. The sewer lift station is expected to be completed in January 2021. The wastewater treatment plant, lagoon upgrades, design and tender is expected to go out next year. And 37% of this is funded through a recently received grant from the town. Coaldale Malloy Phase 2B, 73% of this has been confirmed through grant funding. The sewer relining program, we've also implemented $200,000 annually allocated in the operating budget for this program. So basically a lot of items on the checklist that were at the top of the list, we're getting done. Any questions so far? So before we get into the actual projects, I kind of wanted to give some comparisons on the various revenue streams for the town. So as council, it's important to review these rates annually, not only for the purpose of providing revenue for current year expenses, but also to provide additional funds for future capital replacements. The three main revenue sources that town council can draw on as part of the budget process are municipal tax rates, utility rates, and franchise fees. So municipal tax rates, just be noted that, again, council only has control over the municipal tax. There's other taxes in property tax, such as the education, seniors, that are outside of council's control. Utility rates, user pay system for municipal water, storm, sewer, and waste collection. It should be noted that Coaldale has expanded waste collection program that also includes garbage, recycling, and compost. And franchise fees, these are local rates that municipalities collect from the electricity and gas utility users. So first, provide kind of a comparison for property taxes here. So in doing this comparison, we didn't just pick these cities at random, cities and towns at random. You see this kind of mix. The cities are obviously Lethbridge close to Coaldale, but the other cities selected were due to their similar size of Coaldale. And then we do have some towns that are close in the vicinity to Coaldale. So as you can see, Coaldale's current residential municipal tax rate sitting at $8 and basically 2 cents for every $1,000 of assessed property. The non-residential tax is sitting below average here at just over 10 points. Comparing the municipal and the residential and the non-residential together, it's important to compare the ratio. How much higher is your non-res than your residential? As you can see here, this is where Coaldale is on the lower end at the ratio. So some food for thought here is that for every $1% increase in the residential property tax, that's approximately additional $71,000 of revenue for the town of Coaldale. And it equates to an average of $8.02 for every $100,000 of assessed value. For a 1% non-residential tax increase, the additional revenue is approximately $12,500 and equates to approximately $10.16 for every $100,000 in assessed value. Touching base on utility rates here. Whoops. All good. Again, same cities as compared. It's all good, Councillor Chapman. I don't think I got Councillor Simpson. In kind of comparing the same towns and cities here, Coaldale utility rates are kind of in the average here. Should be a note that you can kind of see on the right, there's some notes about the waste services. For example, Black Falls, Innisfil don't have compost. Coalhurst doesn't have compost. Drumheller, they do have, their rates are lower here as they collect their waste through a special tax on their property taxes. Lethbridge doesn't have compost. Raymond doesn't have compost or recycling. So every 1% increase in utility bill equates to approximately $45,600 in additional municipal revenue. For every 1% increase, the average effect to a household is about $13.81 a year. Finally, I wanted to talk about franchise fees. So on the left here, we have the electrical franchise fee, and the right, we have the gas franchise fee. So the maximum rate that a municipality can charge for gas is 35%. Currently, the town of Coaldale is at 13%. And for electricity, the maximum is 20%, and currently the town's at 11%. So currently, the town sits kind of below average on the electrical reserve and at the bottom for the electrical fee and gas. Lower on that end for the gas franchise fee. So a 1% increase in the electrical franchise fee is approximately $43,500 in annual municipal revenue. The effect on the household is approximately $14.04 per year. A 1% in the gas franchise fee is approximately $18,462 in municipal revenue and a yearly average of $5.96 per household. Excuse me. Any kind of questions on the comparison so far? Okay, so we're getting to the good stuff here. So the operating budget, just to start comparing 2020 versus 2021. So on the revenue side, how's the budget looking so far compared to last year? Investment income is approximately $205,000 lower than previously budgeted. This is over half of what it has normally been. This is due to significantly lower interest rates with the COVID-19 pandemic. User fee revenue is estimated at $55,000 lower. This is approximately a $20,000 decrease across the board due to COVID, with events spaced out more, for example, hockey bookings, and just assume less bookings with COVID. Utility revenues increased by about $60,000 just due to projected increased usage. This isn't at all relating to rates. Tax assessment revenue, $190,000 increase due to new assessment growth. This isn't from tax increases or inflation. This is purely new growth, commercial and residential. Traffic fines for the radar expected to be about $30,000 low, just reduced activity to COVID. Municipal grant funding expected to increase by $160,000 from various sources, and franchise fees approximately $25,000 increase due to increased usage. Comparing the expenses, salaries, wages, and other contracted services expected $25,000 savings in 2021 compared to 2020. The annexation payment to Lethbridge County 2020 was the last year, so that's $105,000 annual savings. Force contracted services, $60,000 in savings. RCMP expense, $100,000 projected increase. The sewer relining program, $100,000 increase. So we're not adding any more to actual expenses to the budget. There's always $200,000 there. But again, as part of asset management and making this a priority, before this was funded 50% through tax and 50% through reserves. We've now moved this 100% through our tax support. So we're essentially not touching reserves for this project and adding $100,000 into the program every year. Again, as part of asset management, we're slowly increasing our municipal reserves each year by a certain percentage. That's $87,000 this year. While that doesn't seem like a big number, it's important to do these small increases to our reserves. So throughout the years, they will build up into a bigger available funds for capital projects. Human resources, legislative, and legal consultants, $80,000 increase. Park special projects, a $50,000 increase for supplies and materials, and $30,000 increase for general communication services. So here is a draft budget of where the revenues sit. So going left to right, you have 2020 and then 2023 in the end. So we had budgeted revenues in 2020 of 19.3 million. That's reduced to 18.7 million for 2021. It's important to note that doesn't mean the town's revenue has dropped by that much. As you can kind of see on the bottom line here, it's called transfer to reserves. So that's essentially us using our savings accounts to fund projects. Again, we're using our operating budget more to fund these projects with a less reliance on reserves, with an example being the sewer lining program. So having this transfer from reserves figure lower is actually good for the town's finances. Overall, though, you can see the revenues for the next 3 years are projected to be fairly stable at roughly $18.7 million. The expenses here, so again, still left to right, 2020 to 2023, we have salaries and wages, contracted general services, materials and supplies, interest and bank charges, principal debt repayments, other expenses, government transfers, and transfers to reserves. So this transfers to reserves, as I just kind of mentioned, we're putting more money into the bank account, and you might ask, well, how come your transfers to reserves are actually decreasing? This is just based solely on projections. So what we do is we project our land sales at the Northeast Industrial Park every year, and those funds 100% go into our reserves. So if we sell 0 lots, there's 0 funds from that going into reserves. If we sell 10 lots, there's funds from 10 lots going into there. With COVID and the low uncertainty of how the economy is working, we've just reduced our estimated lot sales by 1 to be conservative. So if we do sell more, there will be more funds into reserves, if that makes sense. Just touched on a few things here. Again, you can see salaries and wages decreasing from the previous year. So where does that leave us? So currently this is a draft budget, and for 2021, there's sitting at a net deficit funding of $71,000. So of 18.5 million of revenue, we're at $71,000 deficit at the moment. So this $71,000 is based on council approving all the requests as presented. This deficit is before any tax, utility, or franchise fee increase adjustments, as no increases have been based in this budget. Council could, of course, eliminate the deficit funding through a reduction of expenses or increase in revenue, or a combination of both. For 2022 and 2023 budgets, again, they're in draft form. These ones have projected tax increases in them of 1% for residential tax and 2% for non-residential tax each year. But again, these are just placeholders. They're subject to change, but that's just kind of the forecast at the moment.
That that doesn't anticipate any growth in our assessment rate, or,
This does include projected assessment growth, yes.
does,
Yes.
what's the assumption there?
This year, it's approximately $150,000. So that is a little lower than historical in the past couple years. Those projections usually, from our consultant come in lower than the actual. But again, we can't project something higher and then cross our fingers. So yeah, and again, it's about $150,000 for next year.
Your Worship, Kyle, with your ideas on what our revenues and things are, is there anything built into there to say that if COVID or other issues continue for quite a while and we don't have traffic tickets, photo radar for quite some time? Because right now it looks like we lost about $300,000 based on that this year, and that's basically a 6-month period, not a 12-month period. If we extrapolate that out, did you build in a whatever $600,000 or $800,000 loss because of that?
You're referring kind of to the projections for next few years?
Well, even just for next year.
Yeah.
This year it shows that our investment income was down $205,000, and you have an idea that that's
Yeah.
due to some of the COVID issues out there.
We,
Our user fees were down $50,000 or $55,000, and photo radar that was down $30,000. So that's almost $300,000 in 6 months.
yeah, so part of this, we've adjusted the actual anticipated revenues to what we think they will happen with COVID in mind. So this budget does have reduced interest revenue, reduced user fees, reduced traffic fines that we anticipate that will happen with COVID. Part of for 2020, we do anticipate a little bit of a surplus, somewhat of a surplus. The exact number isn't yet known, but as part of this budget is we've taken some of that surplus in and placed a little bit in each of the next 3 years to kind of help stabilize the revenues as they hopefully recover and rebound from COVID. So that has been phased in over the next 3 years to kind of cushion the blow from the COVID loss. So that has been considered. That answers your question.
Your Worship, and through to Kyle, when you're making your comparisons here, just a few pages back to revenue streams, municipal tax rates, and utility rates, and so on, would it be helpful to have some comparisons in terms of salaries and wages? I know that we've done some in years past, and it generally is helpful to know that we're right in the same level or playing field as other municipalities, and just so our general public understand that we're making those comparisons in a fair manner.
Yeah, so actually, over the past few months, we participated in a wage and salary survey that was done by AUMA, and they did it as the Alberta province as a whole. We only received those results a few days ago, so once we kind of get through this budget process here, we'll have time to look at the results and kind of put comparatives of how Coaldale compares to not only other places in Alberta, but other towns similar to Coaldale in size as well. Okay, so now we're talking about the 2021 operating projects, some various additions that we have. So $25,000 has been allocated for professional human resources services. The human resource professional will assist in staff recruitment, the hiring process, assist in annual reviews, and other human resource needs as needed. All staff have access to this contact and request the assistance and can request the assistance of the professional if needed. This model is approximately $75,000 less than the in-house model previously used in other years. So this would be funded through annual tax support, and it would be an ongoing expense. $30,000 in additional funding for a legislative assistant. This is required to assist in the town's completion of various ongoing projects, including reorganization of the town's file management system. There's an increase in demand on current staff because of these projects, and in order to complete these, as well as plan for the upcoming 2021 municipal election, this is why the request is brought forward. This would be funded through tax support, but would only be an expense for 1 year. $24,000 allocated to legislative and legal professional assistance. These professional fees are requested to assist with increasing demand on current staff. This would be funded through tax support and would be an ongoing expense. $50,000 allocated for supplies, materials, construction supplies, and other expenses related to the creation of the Parks Landscaping Division. This department will be responsible for the capital aspects of the town's green spaces. So this would be funded through ongoing tax support as well. It would be an ongoing expense. Kind of talked about the sewer lining program. Again, this project was $200,000 before. Half was funded through tax support and the other half was funded through reserves. As an important area of the town's infrastructure, this is now funded 100% through municipal tax support, essentially adding an extra $100,000 to the town's capital replacement reserves each year. This additional expense would be funded through tax support ongoing. As part of this, we put a 2% increase for budgeted, 2% increase for town's capital replacement reserves. This results in a $37,000 increase for 2021. While this is small on a yearly basis, it's critical to build the town's capital reserves over time. Again, funded through tax support on an ongoing basis. Again, going back to reserves, we've also added $50,000 annual capital reserve for the multi-use recreation facility. This reserve will accumulate through the years to fund major capital replacements for the soon-to-be-built multi-use recreation facility in future years. Again, we're starting the planning and saving for the future early. So then if we do have a major expense for this program and this project, say in 10, 15 years, there are funds available to fund it. This would be an annual tax support ongoing. $30,000 has been allocated for material supplies and other expenses related to the 2021 municipal election. This would be funded through general operating reserves and would be a 1-year expense. We do have $7,000 allocated for replacement of the spray park control panel. This is required to maintain remote operation of the spray park. This is a 1-year expense funded through the spray park reserve, which has an estimated balance of $100,000 in it. I'm just going to pause for a second as I believe I have some guests who are going to come help me on this project.
Your worship, when we're talking about the Parks Landscaping Division, $50,000. A number of years ago, we had an arborist. Is that position still ongoing, or is that rolled into the parks?
We still have the arborist. We still have an arborist on staff. He's doing a great job. This $50,000 isn't a wage expense for any new positions. This is additional funds required for the staff to, say, go out and rebuild a park that needs repair and whatnot. So this is just supplies for that division to invest more into the capital needs of the parks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So did I hear you right, then that $50,000 is for existing parks and upgrades and automation and whatever of existing parks then?
Yes, this is just for parks, yeah, existing parks.
Thanks.
So with that, the next project we have is the Festival of Lights. And with us, we have Cindy Hoffman, who's going to kind of touch on this.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight to ask council to approve an additional $15,000 to be added to the existing $15,000 budget for the Winter Light Festival going forward. The Winter Light Festival was a new event added last year for the community's enjoyment. We are hoping to expand on the tremendous success of the first year of the Light Festival by changing the theme of the festival each year, adding more lights and displays, and involving more community groups in order to provide the entire community of Coaldale and surrounding area a truly unique winter experience. In 2019, we were able to provide the park visitors with different activities, entertainers, entertainment, and hot beverages each night that the park was open, which were Wednesdays and Saturdays through December, and we would like to continue this tradition. In 2019, we estimated that we hosted over 1,400 visitors through 9 evenings. The feedback from the community was extremely positive, with a consistent theme that they hope this becomes an annual tradition for Coaldale. The vision is to develop an ever-growing and magical light display each year for the entire community to enjoy. It could also turn into a long-term project designed to make Coaldale a destination. So the funds mainly would be going towards the addition or increasing the inventory of lights. Last year, we were able to decorate 3 large trees, and this year we have been able to do that again for a total of 6 trees, plus a bunch of ground displays and other light displays. So the $15,000 would go towards the growth of the festival and, like I said, the purchase of the installation and removal of those lights. So in talking with our other departments, parks, and our arborist, the lights can stay up on trees for approximately 2 years, at which point we had been advised that they should come down. So this next year, in 2021, we will have to remove lights, but that does involve added expense in renting a genie boom, because we are quite high in the air with a lot of those lights. So this spring, we will have to rent a genie boom again, remove the lights off the 3 trees. In the fall, potentially, if funding is available, we'd be decorating 6 more trees. So keep moving it forward, adding more large trees to the festival itself. So again, if approved, we're looking at continued growth of the event annually. Last year, we got the additional funding through the community grant, but if we approve the funding through the budget, we would no longer need to rely on the community grant for that continued growth. Should funding not be made available, just the scope of the projects and the change in themes would need to be more consistent from year to year, with limited room for growth and change. So I'm open to any questions.
Councillor Lloyd?
Great job, Cindy. It was beautiful last year.
Thank you.
This budget figure doesn't include any of your staff wages, though?
No, it does not.
Because that's an additional
Yep.
working every 2 nights a week, right?
That is correct. The funding itself, that funding would cover the cost of lights, the rental of the genie boom. It's about $1,500 a week right now. Setting up for this year, it's about two weeks. We need it for setup, and then I'm assuming 2 weeks for tear down, so that's 4 weeks. So you're looking at about $6,000 there. Activities and entertainment, so every night we did have musicians or hay rides or something. There's something different every night. And then just the general expenses, extension cords, timers, paint, stakes, that kind of stuff as well. And then we had beverages, hot chocolate, apple cider every night as well. So that all kind of comes in and adds up to another $15,000.
And then with this, obviously COVID is still in place this year, does that impact your budget positively or negatively? And you wouldn't be doing as many beverage kind of servings and whatnot, I wouldn't imagine.
Correct. I've just actually completed the AHS notification tonight. I'll be sending it off tomorrow with our plan. It will probably affect us positively this year. If I got that the right, we will be saving money this year, because we won't be able to do all the close contact activities as well, the little crafts for the kids, you know, just the musicians, that sort of thing, so.
Great, well, I hope it goes ahead well this year, because it's one more activity that I think can be done quite safely, and it can fill a bit of the void out there that people are missing on having some community activity in that, so. Roger Holm has a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, Cindy, have we ever looked into the opportunity of possible donations from people who come through the event? Because we don't charge a fee for people coming and going through it, and as this thing gets bigger and bigger, I'm guessing more and more people are going to come. I'm just wondering if there isn't some way of setting up kind of an online kind of a GoFundMe, the Festival of Lights kind of opportunity, because I think there's a lot of people that would do that.
Yeah, great question. Last year, we actually just put up a little donation box. We just had a sign, all donations gratefully accepted for the purchase of more lights for this year. And we were thrilled. We just got under $700 in donations just at the park on those 9 evenings. I didn't even think about an online type of donation, so definitely we can be looking at that. The other thing this year, I'm already getting phone calls from community groups to host evenings. So that means they sort of bring their own hot chocolate, their own goodies, that sort of thing. So that will save us. I've actually got 4 community groups asking about that already. And we're looking at, I'm getting a couple of calls from sponsors who are prepared to buy they can't come and host, but they're prepared to sponsor hot chocolate or apple cider. So the word is starting to get out, and we're starting to get some traction on donations and sponsors as well.
So again, we're not looking for any formal approval, yes or no, if council doesn't want to make that yet, but again, just an opportunity to ask Cindy any questions.
Ending, and
Thank you.
we look forward to this year's iteration.
So next, we'll have our operations crew come in here with a request for public works staffing. We have Terry and Justin joining us here.
Good evening, Council. I'm here today to request a public works laborer. One of the challenges we have in public works especially is this department receives the most immediate requests from residents and from other departments. These requests come pretty quickly, and they come almost daily. Things as potholes, sign repairs, garbage left in the alley, roadkill, snow drifting, drainage cleanout, and assisting other departments with various tasks. To come up with a complete list would have taken quite a bit of your time, so the value of this position is adding more manpower to the department, will enable staff to maintain the service level we expect, while being able to respond quicker to immediate requests. Position duties will be responsible for conducting general maintenance functions for roads and public works operations such as snow removal, snow fence installation, construction projects, paving preparation, and other maintenance and installation activities. The salary is estimated at $51,000. Currently, this is included in the draft operating budget. This position would be funded through the annual operating budget moving forward. Any questions?
Worship, I appreciate hearing more about this. Obviously, with the expansion of our pathways as well, you might be using that person for snow removal in some of those areas. And of course, with Main Street, the new design probably will need some more attention as well.
Actually, the pathways is under our Parks and Rec department, and they will be helping seasonal staff and using the Parks and Rec staff to do the pathways. The Main Street snow removal, we don't expect it to be any more challenging as a road department, so we take a little more time and go a little slower with the new concrete, of course, but it's no expected manpower. This is more for throughout the year, and this position will also help with snow removal, though.
Thank you.
That answers your question. No other questions. I will move on. So this is the proposed compost branch drop-off site. Just give you a background. So in 2020, we did a pilot project of the bins outside of the arena. These two bins were very heavily used, quite a more heavily than we thought. Unfortunately, there was compliance issues throughout the year. It plagued them. Contamination of the bins and garbage branches were too large to compost despite several communication campaigns. When contamination with solid waste occurs, the contractor was forced to take the bins to the landfill, which increased tipping fees. So moving forward, staffing of this site will be required just to ensure compliance. Just having signs was not nearly enough, it seems, and communication campaigns weren't working. So overuse, being overfilled by large tree branches. We've seen some people back in trailers with full trees been there. We tried to stop people, but they'll just come back later in the day and do it without us there. So staff time will be required to keep the bins usable. And then we also use a loader separately. So I have two options to present here. Yard waste bins at the arena from April to November, kind of like we did this year. However, we will have a staff member monitor the site as it's open. The estimated cost of this would be about $50,000. The staffing is $25,000. Tipping fees and bin rental would be $25,000. The pros for this site is it's easily accessible for the public. The cons, the bins cannot accept branches larger than 3 and 4 inches in diameter. And one of the big cons with this site, it reduces the parking for the arena during large events. Luckily, through COVID, we didn't have any large events, so we were able to utilize that space relatively easy this year. In future years, I expect that being somewhat of an issue. So here's our option 1. As you guys know, that's where it was this year. Our option 2 is we have a site that was conditioned this year. It's usually used for our excess materials during projects. We were able to condition it kind of this year for a potential site like this and grade it. The site is located south of our lagoons. Proposed site would have 1 bin for leaves and grass clippings, and then a drop-off place for branches of really any size up to a limit. We can't take full trees, but we could take quite a bit larger branches, because at this site we would be moving them to our burn pile, which is right next door. It's very limited transport fees and labor, and we'd be able to burn those. So the staffing for the site is the same as the other site. The tipping fees is quite a bit less, because now we're not actually taking compost to branches to the compost. It will just be leaves and grass clippings in cardboard bags and paper bags. So the pros is this site will be able to accept large branches all season long, less tipping fees, and it's a possibility to make this a permanent site if council so wishes. This is a site that's, it's a little bit out of the way, but it's also not in the dead center of town and being an eyesore. So the cons is that this site is less centrally located. So here's just a quick picture of the site, that purple square there. Our lagoons are just north of it. So we would have access. We already have gates up at this site, so there's no cost with that. And we would have a staff member stationed here. And while they weren't busy helping residents, we can have them, cleaning up the site, and we could also have them running a wood chipper. So
Just speak to the costing of these. So it's important to the council know that whichever option they decide to proceed with, or if they decide to proceed with any of the two options, the costing for either service option isn't currently included in the draft operating budget. As a result, council could choose either option, but a funding source would be required. The key consideration for council is that whether this service is a service level that council wishes to continue. Should utility rates be adjusted to absorb the cost for the service? Or should something else be taken out of the budget to make more room for it? Or should the service simply be discontinued? So I'll see if council has any questions on this project.
Just the one question, when we get into the compost or into recycling as a whole, one of the things that I've heard concerning quite a few people are concerned that they can no longer use or put glass into the recycling bins. They can't put shredded paper and a number of other items can no longer go into their recycling bins. Is there an option going to be looked at to put up a recycling site similar to Lethbridge, where you can take your glass and take your shredded paper and those type of things? Because right now, it's all being tipped now. It's all going to the dump, and it's gonna have to, I'm sure it's gonna reflect on the dollars coming into our waste management.
Thank you, Councillor Holm. I can talk about the glass a little bit. I have done quite a bit of research since we no longer allowed glass in the blue bins. There's quite a few reasons we're not allowing glass in the blue bins. One is if the glass breaks, it contaminates everything else in that blue bin. Other than that, glass is actually exiting the recyclable materials across Canada. This isn't something that's unique to Coaldale or Lethbridge. Glass is being taken out of the recycling of it across Canada right now. Less people and less products are using recycled glass, so it's not worth anything. So most of the glass that's being recycled now is ending up in landfills, unfortunately, anyways. To speak to the shredded paper and the bags, those are things that go through the sorting machine and can't be. The shredded paper exactly makes quite a mess, contaminates everything also. And there are other options. However, we could look at creating a recycling center, and that's something I could bring back as an option in the future. I know these centers are somewhat costly, like the ones Lethbridge have. I was part of the engineering team that actually designed the one on the west side. So I could come up with some preliminary costs to do something similar, or not quite as big, I would recommend, so.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you so much. My question is about compost, and I'm just was really fascinated and very pleased to see the amount of compost material that was being dumped off there at those two bins. I don't know what kind of numbers you're dealing with in terms of drop-off, and I'm just wondering if and any of those drop-offs if they're from outside of town, and so we'd be incurring a cost for that, as opposed to the old transfer station out in the county. They used to take compost for free, and that could be from anyone. But if we're going to be employing, some resources to man and monitor this site, I would need to ensure that our residents of Coaldale are first and foremost.
Yes, I would agree with that completely. If we are staffing this site, which would be recommended going forward, that part of that staff member's duties would be to track people coming and going, and then make sure they're Coaldale residents using the site. And we will have other options for people who aren't Coaldale residents. We can come up with a policy around that for sure.
Develop a policy in the meantime for that in event of. I'm sure that people from outside of town need to find a place to drop off, and if we can make it available to them for a fee, I suppose, then we should be able to, I don't have trouble with that.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. In reply to Councillor Holmes's inquiry about shredded paper, I think we can put that into compost. Can't we put small pieces of cardboard and shredded paper into the compost?
I believe so we can. I'd have to double check the policy, but
I think
you're
that's what they
correct. Yeah,
said
shredded
on-
paper and cardboard can go into small pieces of cardboard
Yeah.
can go in the compost, so.
CAO Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a question for Justin here. Just looking at the laborer position that you had proposed a few slides previous, is the vision, or is there a possibility that laborer position could fulfill the labor requirements of this drop-off site? Or are you looking at getting perhaps a temporary seasonal type worker to perform that responsibility?
I would be looking at a temporary seasonal worker to fulfill the responsibility of the recycling depot.
Councillor Holm?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Option 2 is at the existing county dump, it looks like. Have we looked at joining forces with the county and cost sharing a person that's sitting at the gate there anyways?
Go ahead.
It's an excellent question, Councillor Holm. We would have to join the Waste Commission, which is not an impossibility, but that entire site is governed through a commission, so we would have to make application to join that, which would be a little bit more complicated than just cost sharing on the employee that they have there. In the ICF process, with Lethbridge County and the other municipalities in the region, we have talked about ways that we can collaborate further on waste management, because it is sort of silly to have a facility right on our doorstep that we can't use unless you pay $40. If you drive by, there's a billboard almost that says Coaldale residents have to pay $40. And we get a lot of negative feedback from people who go there who have to pay such an exorbitant amount. It's cheaper for them to use our coupon and then inconveniently drive all the way to Lethbridge. So I think based on like the questions and the notes I'm taking, like I just want to confirm with council, would council like administration to come back with a more comprehensive analysis for how to handle overflow waste, organics, and recycling, and even turn the rock over on the garbage end as part of this discussion, and then table that, and then we can do a bit more of an extensive analysis and then come back from there? Am I getting the right drift? I just want to check in here.
Your worship, through to Kalen, I fully support that idea. I think that that would be a real good way of dealing with some of those duplicate type of situations, especially if we're going to be storing or unloading compost right beside another compost station. And so it just seems a little bit futile if we have to join a commission for a bit of a cost. I don't have any issue with that. I know, just as an aside, that we are receiving a very, very occasionally the odd garbage from outside in the county being dropped off in various black bins and blue bins and compost bins. So I'm just going to leave it at that because I do know of that situation. So I think this commission idea might be a way of handling those type of situations much more readily, be more transparent with our neighbors in the county as well.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. Back to the position, I need to ask the question because I'm sure we're going to be asked it as elected officials. As we create new positions, are we going to be looking at calling back employees that have been let go or laid off to fill these positions if they are the proper skill set for these positions, or these new positions that are going to be advertised and competed for?
CEO Hastings?
Yeah, excellent question. Under our collective agreement, if an employee is restructured out of the organization, they have one of two options. They can go on layoff, and then they have a 6-month period where if there is a position that's created, then if they meet the minimum qualifications, experience, and requisite criteria, then that would be a position that they could entertain to come back to. The other option under the collective agreement is that they would take severance, which relinquishes any right that they would have for any type of a recall. So in that case, provided they aren't disqualified by other reasons, they could make application for the position like anybody else.
And I just went back to the discussion about more exploration of the possibilities of how handling more waste and whatnot, including the thought about the waste transfer station and whatnot. Being that I believe that one of the growth industries is waste, there seems to be more and more of it all the time, and I think that Coaldale's been a little bit disadvantaged by not being part of a waste commission and that, because there's lots of organizations that these commissions belong to, and they learn different techniques, and there's I get an email because I'm on the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste, and there's an initiative about chemical recycling and different other initiatives out there. So I think the possibility of being part of a commission and making more use of a local asset like the county's waste transfer facility and whatnot is possibly a rock we should look under, that's for sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would too agree that I would like this looked into a little bit more. $35,000 to $50,000 a year is a lot for something that you know, if used correctly by the residents, it wouldn't be needed to that expense. But unfortunately, because there has been issues in the past, I would just like to see if there's a way of having this drop-off site a little bit less costing, and hopefully that you don't have to have employees just sitting there waiting for it. But I would like to explore all options for that.
Ed? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since this is a sanctioned council meeting, council's at liberty to make a resolution at any time in the meeting if they so choose. So if there is some agreement amongst council about administration doing a deeper dive on waste management, you could make a resolution and then we can formally respond to that. If not, I do have detailed notes here, and that we will have a more detailed presentation coming down the pipe at a later date. So just to let council know.
Okay, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you. In light of that, I'll make a motion to have administration look into the Waste Management Commission and bring back a report for council consideration.
I would, maybe that's kind of limiting. You know, you're directing them to look at a commission only. You know, I think it might be more advantageous to make it a broader scope and come out with options that could include that kind of thing, but is your motion.
I think something to that in that spirit would be fantastic.
Okay. Well, Councillor Chapman moves direct administration to explore further options in waste management as discussed this evening. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
So that's kind of the operating portion of the presentation. There was a few other, again, projects we touched on. I just want to kind of give, before we move on to the capital, if there's any other operating projects we touched on that members of council had questions about that I could answer, or if we should just proceed to capital.
When we get into the capital projects, but right near the first, I should have cut you off when we were at infrastructure management, your master plan and stuff. And I was just wondering, with the asset management program that you've got now, do you assign total value of all of our assets in town, life expectancy, et cetera, and does it spit out a number as to how many dollars annually we should be putting into replacement of our capital assets?
When looking at how much we should be putting into capital assets, the easy question is it's always more, right? There's never a limit that you could put on to putting into it. But kind of the rule of thumb, like the exact dollar amount for the infrastructure master plan, we're not quite at that detail. But you should be replacing your reserves as your assets depreciate. So for example, if we look at how much depreciation we have yearly on our financial statements, it's roughly about $2.5 million. And with the sales to the Northeast Industrial, we're putting approximately $2.5 million into reserves. But again, assets we have now depreciating, they're going to cost more to replace than the depreciation just due to inflation, economies of scale and whatnot. So I don't have an exact dollar amount, but the short answer is look at, if you're close to your depreciation, which we are, you're all right. But again, when we're looking at the budgeting process as a whole, if there's a surplus or areas of excess, we're putting that into reserves and saving as much as we can for the future. So we're not inflating our operating budget, we're keeping that lean and saving as much as we can for capital. So when we get more into the review of the infrastructure master plan, we should have more of a detailed number that you're looking for. Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll just kind of move on to capital. So before getting into the individual projects, it's important to discuss the model for capital funding. The purpose for allocating funds. Available funds are essentially grouped together and allocated out among the various projects. The resulting effect is that completed projects that are under budget result in additional funds that are available for other projects. So there are three projects in which such savings were redirected. This includes the multi-use recreation facility, traffic and utility infrastructure for the multi-use recreation facility, lagoons / wastewater treatment upgrades. So getting into the capital projects, the total amount of funding available for these projects mentioned on the previous slide that were generated through sale of existing assets and other grant projects that were under budget totals approximately $8,250,000. To get to this number, there was approximately $4 million of MSI capital and federal gas tax grants that were not allocated, or funding from other projects were in the budget, or the excess funding allocated to us was greater than what we previously had projected. There's also $2,125,000 in land sales and related offsite levies, and just over another $2 million in other non-specific municipal grants and related project surplus. So further detail regarding each of these capital projects will be provided throughout the meeting. However, should council wish to continue forward with these projects contained in their multi-year capital plan, it's recommended that the $8,250,000 in revenue identified be allocated as following. So we'll start with a punchline here, followed by a detailed project variance in the slides to follow. So $3 million allocated to the multi-use recreation facility. Note on the October 26th council meeting, the established budget for this project was projected to increase from $10 million to $13 million. $2.5 million for road, sewer, water, and utility infrastructure for the new multi-use recreation facility. $750,000 for traffic lights that are required for any future Western Coaldale development, and $2 million for the lagoon wastewater upgrades. Just note at this time that doesn't include any reserves available for this project as well.
Worship, I just got a question, and it goes back to the initial slide for this, and we keep saying traffic and utility infrastructure for multi-use recreational facility, and then we're allocating money, 250. Isn't that for the Northwest development, not just the recreational facility? Like, to me, now that's another $2.5 million added onto the cost of our multi-use recreational facility. But are we not putting in the infrastructure and the road for that Northwest development, including the high school, including residential in the future? Like, I just don't think that's worded right, because there's more to that than just, and then same with the traffic. It should be northwest development, not just for the rec facility, because it's looking like we've got 13 million plus 2.5 million plus 750,000. So now we're up to 18 million for the rec facility rather than the whole development of the annexation.
Yeah, and good point, Councillor Avery. That's just an oversight on my part. I'll make sure we get the wording switched, but you're exactly correct.
Go ahead, CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Councillor Avery. Excellent question. The original budget that was approved back in November 2018 had a budget forecast of 10 million for the multi-use recreational facility, and then 5 million for the corresponding core infrastructure, including roads and deep service extensions and signal lights. So the actual aggregate budget for the project was 15 million, approved back in November 2018. Two interesting points of note with the $2.5 million. There'll be a slide with a really nice diagram that shows where exactly within the quarter section the road and service extensions will take place. As council knows, we own the entire quarter section, and there's 80 acres of residual land on the western half of that quarter section. I would make the suggestion that by putting in infrastructure inputs, it provides the immediate need for access to the multi-use rec center and high school, but it also adds to the asking price that council can seek for that land should a developer acquire that property. You've done some of the legwork for them, which makes it not only more desirable, but you're going to recoup some, if not all, of these input costs as a result of a future land sale. With respect to the signal lights of 750,000, off-site levies for any of the new growth, either north or south of the highway, a subset of the off-site levies for that could be redirected to help reimburse council for that expense that you're actually fronting because there's an immediate need, but it's money that you're likely to get back in the form of other growth and development both north and south, if that helps a little bit.
Councillor Chapman?
Was answered about off-site levies.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just sorry, one last point. I'm stealing a tad of Kyle's thunder because he does address this in some subsequent slides, so I'm cherry picking on his excellent work, but there is some additional infrastructure grant dollars that we received as part of the province's stimulant efforts in response to COVID, totaling just over $1 million. That $1 million has been applied to these infrastructure inputs, including the roads and sewer as well as the signal lights.
Okay, so moving on, the multi-use recreation facility, again, just to highlight, the previous approved budget was $10 million funded through the annual recreation tax levy, $3 million funded through excess MSI capital and federal gas tax funds. Again, it brings us to a new available funding of $13 million.
Okay, Councillor Simpson's recusing herself for the next item. It'll be noted the time that she left. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just acting as Lana tonight.
You're looking pretty rough, Lana.
Late nights getting this budget stuff done, right? So, yeah. So in regards to Civic Square, the total budget for the town's portion of the project is $5,830,000. Note in the 2019-2021 capital budget, the total cost estimate was $8,630,000. This was under the assumption that the town was the developer of the project. With the town no longer the developer of the project, the budget has been reduced as the expense for the commercial space within Civic Square will be borne by the third-party developer. However, due to the town currently being in negotiations with a preferred developer, further details regarding this project will be provided to council once negotiations for a development agreement have been finalized. It's kind of just a placeholder for now.
There's a council on this item. It's important to clear those off because I don't want to trap Councillor Simpson if somebody wants to go backpedaling when we're in another slide or something like that. So just take a minute, and if there are no questions, then I'll go. Councillor White volunteer. Oh, Councillor Holm.
So, I don't have my last year's budget in front of me, and I guess I should have. I'm sorry about that. But last year we had projected at $8.6 million for the Civic Square. But then was there not about $4 million worth of sales of some of the condo units that were going to be developed at that same time? So really, the budget for our share of it was only about 4.3 million or something, if I can remember the numbers, and now we're at 5.8. Am I getting that right?
You're correct on the budget amount numbers, but the reduction in revenue for the sales was approximately was around $2 million, 2.5, 2.8 million. So it was the difference between the two numbers that you see on the screen. So it wasn't quite $4 million. So the actual town portion for the Civic Square project hasn't changed from the previous budget.
Okay. All right. We'll just retrieve Councillor Simpson. You noted that Councillor Simpson returned to the meeting, and go ahead on the next slide.
So I have my engineering expert, Andrew Kester, here to do some explaining for me.
Okay, so the first project I'll talk about is the Northeast Industrial Park. When we've looked at the work that needs to do there, we need to repair all the road deficiencies that are currently there and then place the top lift of asphalt along 13th and 14th Avenue and all through 11th Street. So we're currently excluding 12th Avenue from this top lift because there are a lot of lots that still need to be sold and serviced. So we will plan that at a future date. We've actually re-looked at the costs for this project. We looked at them last year and we looked at them again this year and found with a lot of the construction savings that we've been seeing that the pricing are coming in lower this year. So the project was re-estimated at $470,000 and that includes a 15% contingency.
So here's just kind of a map where the proposed paving would be taking place in the industrial park, as Andrew mentioned.
It's a little hard to see in this room, but there are some red spots on the roads. Those are the road deficiencies that we found and need to be replaced first before doing the top lift.
So in regards to kind of the schedule and the funding, this was discussed last year at the budget. So previously the work was scheduled to be performed in 2020 and 2021. However, there was a few additional costs from Fortis that were required. We also had lower lot sales in 2019 than we had anticipated. So because of this, it kind of reduced the available funds for this project, in which it was temporarily delayed. With industrial lot sales increasing for 2020 and lower construction costs, as Andrew mentioned, the project is scheduled to be completed in 2021. The funding for this project would be through the Northeast Industrial Reserve. However, again, this reserve is dependent on lot sales. So it's likely that the reserve will be in a small deficit balance for maybe a year or two while construction is finished. However, again, this would be back into a surplus with the lot sales. So kind of put this into perspective here. Based on the expenses we kind of have and the revenue we incurred, there's only about $60,000 estimated in this bank account, reserve account at the end of this year. Once we have the revenue or the expenses here. So the expenses consist of the asphalt and then the loan payment. So those loans would cover covering the 8th Street North construction largely. So after those next 3 years, there would be total expenses of the project about $1.3 million. So total of that over this time, approximately 10 one-acre lots would have to be sold in the next 3 years to cover the related expense. So that's an average of 4 lots per year over the next 3 years, assuming a status quo price of $144,000 an acre. That would have to be sold to bring the reserve balance back into a surplus. Just some context. So for 2018, town of Coaldale had approximately $3 million in lot sales. 2019, that dropped down to about $300,000, and this current year we're up to about $800,000. So you can see it can fluctuate year to year. So since the reserve balance and costing has changed, this is being brought to council as a budget amendment. Any questions on that project before we move on to the next?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Andrea, if I may. I guess my observations with the city of Lethbridge and their road rehabilitation programs and upgrades and what have you, that there's a lot of work being done, and I don't know if it's right or not, true or not, but my understanding is that asphalt prices are probably at a really good rate. And I'm just wondering whether they had taken advantage of those rates and just, ramped up that rehabilitation program throughout the city because of those rates. And maybe is that something we should be looking at as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, thank you for that question. I don't know officially. I know City of Lethbridge typically does have quite a as an outsider or, like as a resident of Lethbridge, it seems like they do quite a bit of asphalt every year. I personally didn't notice a huge increase, and I couldn't tell you if they did do it because of the asphalt pricing. That is something that we could look into. We kind of looked at this as more of a cost-benefit analysis that we could go ahead and do 12th Ave, but we would have to pre-service those lots. So there's a risk and a benefit with that, that if all the lots get sold as 1 acre lots, there's no risk there. We wouldn't lose any money. But if we had another business that came in and bought 4 of those lots, say, we would have to tear up those services and put in new ones. So that's how we looked at it. So it was more of that cost-benefit analysis, that if there was an area that it made sense to, I would absolutely promote that. But I do think this is the best kind of cost-benefit analysis for the industrial park right now.
Councillor Avery? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. So what's the risk factor if we don't put the top coat on it this year and we look at doing some of the residential roads that are in bad need of, because I see there's red marks in here, but these roads like 11th Street have been on with their first layer for 5-6 years. So what's the risk factor of leaving it for a couple years and evaluating the rest of the town and seeing what roads really need to be fixed in the residential area before the industrial area?
There's through the chair to Councillor Avery, there's a few things on that. We actually did look at that prior to this meeting on if that was a possibility. The hard part is there's no firm way to know exactly what that asphalt will do this year. We know it's degraded quite a bit in the last year, when we looked at it last year to this year, but no one is really able to say exactly what will happen in one more year. So there is a risk to that. We also, as part of the infrastructure master plan, they looked at all the roads in Coaldale, residential versus industrial. And this area did come up very high on the infrastructure master plan as well as needed to be done. The other thing I wanted to mention is we have heard from a lot of businesses in the industrial park. There's been a lot of questions on when these roads will get fixed and get that top lift on. And we have even heard from some people who are interested in purchasing lots that it doesn't look as good. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there that, we need to sell lots to do this work, but it seems like we need to do some of this work to be able to sell more lots as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a follow-up to Councillor Avery's question, what we could do, if council's interested, is just provide an update on what some of the road condition analysis and priority areas are, so you can see how industrial park falls relative to the rest of the community. If the desire of council is for us to explore some potential overlay type projects, we can look at that, look at our resource loading, and council can decide if it wishes to rearrange some of the priorities, table a project to add another project. I will say that the core infrastructure, the traditional street roads, that's going to become a much more consistent and prevalent capital priority starting in 22, 23, and 24. This was the big core. The last couple of years were some huge core infrastructure projects, but in terms of the priorities coming forward and the purpose of the savings behind it, you're going to start seeing a lot more of that conventional, traditional street roads. Right now, the big core infrastructure project, as you know, on the docket for 21 is the wastewater treatment plant, but you're going to start seeing a lot more road projects pop up starting in 22 and beyond. My question through to council is, would council like to look at some options of moving capital projects around for some overlay for the year 21, or I want to just kind of follow up on Councillor Aby's question because it's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. I won't say too much more else. Support Councillor Avery's thought process. I really honestly believe that we need to really develop a really robust attitude, proactive attitude towards street and road replacement in Coaldale moving forward. I hear quite a bit about it on the street, and obviously more from residents than in the industrial park, and I'm glad that the industrial park is speaking up to you, Andrea, and so I would just like just the affirmation that council will look into that. As you say, you're thinking of 2022 as a kind of like a benchmark start.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, that's correct. I'm just reminding council that if you look at the different priorities identified in the advanced master plans, you're going to see a lot higher emphasis on the traditional street roads, deep services, paving. We already do a lot of the maintenance type work for paving, but the actual full rebuild of a street, for example, those type of projects are going to be a lot more of an intense emphasis, you know, in the next 5 years. I'm just saying there aren't any big major street road projects in 21 because of all the other projects on the docket, but that doesn't mean that advanced planning for them isn't happening. They're just going to start starting in 22 and beyond. Was the point, yeah.
Hey, Andrea? Carry on.
Again, just to Councillor Avery's point, again, this does say recreation center infrastructure upgrades, but it is related to the northwest development of Coaldale as a whole. So with that being said, I'll turn it back to Andrew.
Thank you. So to service a new recreation center and school site, we need to connect the sanitary sewer and water east to 16th Avenue, and then also another water line south to 18th Avenue. This is called looping of the water line, and it provides redundancy in the system so that if there's a break in one water line, the rec center and school would still have a water supply. So when we're looking at additional roads, we also would extend 16th Avenue out to the facility and then provide a road south to 18th Avenue. This again provides 2 access points to the facility. In addition to this, in the spring of 2021, we'll start construction on the signal lights that will be installed on Highway 3 and 30th Street.
So in regards to the cost estimate for the road and utility infrastructure, estimated about 2.5 million. So construction is 1.9, materials testing 55,000, 15% contingency of 290,000, engineering services, and the total, again, estimated shade just below 2.5, but for rounding purposes at $2.5 million. This option for the road includes 11-meter wide asphalt road, curb gutters, no sidewalks have been included, as connection would be done via the town's pathway network, or phase 2 of the Coaldale's pathway network. Cost for the traffic control and signal lights estimated at $750,000. So the total cost estimate is $3,250,000. So just to get into the funding sources again for the total of the 3.25 million, as Kaylin mentioned before, Government of Alberta Municipal Stimulus Program grant to the town of Coaldale of just over $1 million. Application was submitted in September. Due date was October 1st. I just received an email follow-up to one of my requests as to the status of the funding from Municipal Affairs. The project has been sent forward by Municipal Affairs for approval to the Minister. So again, the project funding has to be approved by the Minister, but it has been approved by, or recommended by Municipal Affairs for approval. Other sources of funding would include the offsite levies from land sales, sale of land, and 2020 operational surplus to round us up to the $3.25 million. Any further questions on this project before we move on to the next? None that, we will move on to the lagoon upgrades.
So this might be old information, but we thought it's been a while since we've talked about it. We'd go over it quick. So the province of Alberta provides an approval for the operation of the lagoons under the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. Under the town's current approval, the lagoons must be upgraded to meet these current standards. The detailed design of the upgrades must be completed by October of 2021 and the construction completed by October of 2022 as per our current approval. So the detailed design will be completed and ready to tender the project in March of 2021, which is ahead of the approved schedule. The estimated cost for this project was $8,780,000 from the 2019 capital budget deliberations. So this price included a 10% contingency and 12% for engineering fees. And the original scope of the project included the replacement of existing aeration equipment, addition of nitrification process, chemical phosphorus removal, and tertiary treatment system. So in early 2020, MPE updated the pre-design report and cost estimates and actually totaled it up at almost 10.5 million. Many of the cost estimates remained constant, but there were some major increases that I'd like to discuss with you tonight. The existing Cell 2 liner in the lagoons has degraded in the last 4 years and needs to be replaced, and that was an estimated cost of $150,000. The total contingency in the 2016 number, which was 8.78 million, was 10%, and we've increased this to 20% because the AMWWP funding that we've received allows for a 20% contingency. Also, we've added geotechnical material testing at a cost of $75,000 as per the requirements for funding. And then the cost estimate for desludging the cells has increased because we have 4 additional years of sludge in the cells. And the Sager system package, which decreases the total ammonia and nitrogen levels to meet current standards, has increased in the past 4 years by almost $500,000. In addition, the pricing for the disc filter system, which is the tertiary treatment, has increased by $130,000. The town has received a grant through the Alberta Water and Wastewater Partnership, the AMWWP, and this grant covers 37.17% of the applicable costs. This grant fund was not confirmed last fiscal year, however, it is now confirmed. And due to the town receiving the AMWWP grant, there is an opportunity to upgrade other areas of the lagoons that eventually need to be replaced, with a portion covered off through provincial grant funding. The additional areas that we are considering for upgrades are the effluent or the river pump station upgrades. So this is the pump house that pumps the treated effluent from the lagoons out to the Old Man River. So we're looking at replacing the piping and valves, upgrading the HVAC system, and upgrading the electrical instrumentation and controls. We've also looked at our main lift station, some pump upgrades there. We're talking about replacing the 2 existing 60 horsepower pumps with new 100 horsepower pumps, and also adding VFDs or variable frequency drives. The benefits of VFDs is that it allows the pumps to ramp up and ramp down, so it's a lot more energy efficient, and the pumps last a lot longer because they're not turning on and off and starting and stopping so frequently. So these upgrades to the effluent pump house and pumping capacity upgrades to the main lift station are required to ensure both facilities, which really are integral to the treatment process, are viable for the design life of the treatment upgrades. These additional upgrades could be postponed for a few years. However, at that time, there'd be no funding opportunities, and the town would be responsible for the entire cost to upgrade, which is roughly $1.36 million. By including these upgrades as part of the grant project, the town would receive an additional $500,000 in funding. So here's a quick look at some of the lagoon upgrades. You can just see, so a lot of them are more mechanical. There's only 2 more cells that will be added. So the physical footprint doesn't change drastically.
So when we look at the funding for this project, again, the AMWWP grant covers 37.17 of project costs. Excess municipal cash and grants that we kind of talked about before, with those pooled of capital funds, roughly $2.1 million, and then municipal cash. I believe this actually, from my estimate, should be 1.5 million there, not 1.465. So just kind of talking about the sewer reserve. So additional funds have been allocated to this reserve every year, as it wasn't been a priority of need. Approximately $330,000 are allocated to the sewer reserve fund each year. So once this project is kind of underway, there will be a balance of about $500,000 left in this reserve. So total municipal cash available for the project is roughly should be about $3.6 million there through debenture, or sorry, $3.5 million through debenture debt. 3.5 million in cash available, the balance is to be funded through debenture debt. There we go. So kind of what does this mean? So if we look at the project here, there's the original cost, the 10.5 that MPE kind of projected out. What we've done is we've just, shown if you need 0% contingency versus if you need 20% contingency. So those are the first two columns there on the left. Moving over to the right, this is for basically the full upgrades that Andrea talked about. Again, showing from 0% contingency to basic. So as you can see, the projects initially estimate can range from about $8.7 million to about 11.8. So the funding will change based on the cost of the project. So again, the higher the cost of the project, the more funding available. Once we take out the municipal cash that we have available for the project, it's about 3.5. You can see the debenture debt required to fund the project can range from under $2 million to just over $4 million. This debt still is reduced from the original projected level of 4.5 in last year's budget. Again, and we have added potential increases in the scope of the project for additional items that could be upgraded. So it's recommended that the debenture debt related to the lagoon upgrades be funded through utility fees, again, user pay system. Due to the timing of construction and funds available, in addition to the debenture debt being required, it's recommended that the potential utility fee adjustment to be phased over 2 years. So if we're looking about funding the debenture debts and how we're going to do that, I do have some kind of projections here. So there's a lot of numbers, so I'll run them through here. So the first two sections here is what a utility rate adjustment would look in year 1. And then the bottom two are what a utility rate adjustment would look in year 2. I've also shown 2 different loan examples for council to consider. You don't have to make a decision now, but just for the context of consideration, there's a 20-year loan, which interests, again, are at historical lows. Right now it's 1.94%, and a 25-year loan at 2.13%. So essentially, I'm just going to pick on the least expensive option versus the most expensive option if the funding, how it came in. If you can kind of see my mouse here, year 1, this would require a 1.29% increase to utility fees. This is for the lowest cost that we mentioned on the previous slide. If we go back to, if it comes in at the highest cost, we mentioned it's about a 2.61% increase in year 1. So the average cost per household would be $17.97 or 79 cents a year versus up to $35.97 a year. This would be the year 1, phase 1 increase, followed by year 2. Again, this could range from 1.27% to 2.54% for 20-year loan. With this being a long-term capital project, it's probably recommended to use this as a 25-year loan. The reason why longer debenture debt is good is because the longer you have the debt, the users who are using the actual system are paying it now. If you say use all the cash you have in the bank now to fund this, it's only the current taxpayers who are funding this. So using long-term debenture debt allows for a more equal user pay system for everyone who will be using it over the expected useful life to pay their equal share of it. So in the second year, debenture debt utility fee increase could range from 1.09% to 2.18%. So again, total utility fee increase in the second year would be about $15 versus $30, depending on where the cost of the project come in. So the timeline is for design and to be completed and be tendered is March 2021. So there's many variables to consider when evaluating options. There's up to a 20% contingency used in these estimates. Construction prices have been recently lower than cost estimates. And as part of the upgrades available, council can decide to proceed with some upgrades, but not others. So as a result, again, these are estimated prices, but it's kind of a recommendation to proceed with detailed design and tender while making upgrades for the additional items available in the tender. When a firm pricing is available in the spring of 2021, the options can be presented to council for review, at which time council can decide which upgrades, if any, they would like to proceed with, along with the potential utility fee adjustments for such debenture debt. So when we're talking about the loan required to fund here, again in yellow, and a potential utility rate increase to fund that, with the firm price not known, we're again recommending to hold off on final decisions of potential increases till spring of 2021, when council has firm prices and all options available to them. But again, this is just kind of projection of what to maybe expect coming in 2021. Council have questions on the lagoon project here?
So how likely is a 20% contingency going to be used?
It's hard to really guess until you get into it, but the goal is that you don't need to use it. It's just with the grant, they will pay up to 20% in the contingency, so we wanted to show that. But the goal, of course, would be to not be using it. The one positive thing is MPE Engineering, who's doing the design, has done a lot of these systems and they have a lot of experience. So I'd be more worried about dipping into that contingency if we didn't have experienced designers working on it. Not to say that we might not also, things come up. That's why there's a contingency, but I'm more comfortable assuming we won't go into all of it for sure.
CEO Hastings?
And just to add to the discussion, so the grant funding that we got from the WWOA something is 37.17%. And so because of how good of prices that we've been getting, we thought it was prudent to get other additional line items bid at the same time, because you may get such a good deal. You can apply that 37% off coupon, for lack of a better word. That's part of the reason that we're not expanding the scope for any other reason that you might get a smoke-in deal in terms of the tender, and then 37% of those additional line items which are eligible will be funded through that grant. So it's one of those wait and see with actual real tendered numbers. But we thought it was at least prudent to see what the tender prices came in at. Otherwise, if we don't look at the prices today, it'll be a new budget request for council in 3 to 5 years from now, and you may not have that 37% grant application. So now is your best chance at it, if that follows.
Just want to add to the funding, again, balance is always good in a project. You can kind of see here, it's fairly good balance between the options, and it's not a third, but it's as close as you can kind of be. Third grant, third cash, third debenture. This is kind of the thought process in previous budgets, and again, this is kind of continued with the lagoon upgrades as well, with what portion for cash versus debenture debt as well.
Councillor Holm?
Worship. Andrea, just wondering, I should probably have heard this because we've talked lagoons so many times in the past. How big a town are we built out to? Are we running at 30, 40% capacity or 90% capacity right now? And is this additions and changes that we're making, is it going to get us so that we're looking at being able to service our population 25, 30 years from now?
That's a great question, Councillor Holm. We're actually at capacity right now today. And then when we have full build out, it will provide 25 years capacity.
If I don't see any other questions on this project, we'll move on to the next one. Andrew again.
Okay. I wonder, Kyle, do you want to just go to the next slide and I'll talk and then the picture can be up? So the scary looking pipe on the screen right there is the header pipe in our potable water reservoir. So the header pipe actually brings the water into the reservoir, and the theory behind this is that you want the potable water to enter the reservoir as far away from where you take it out of the reservoir, because you don't want the water to short circuit and kind of take the quickest route, right? You want it to use the entire reservoir, so you don't have a dead zone, they call it, but a stagnant area where you might not have the chlorine content that we need. So you can see in there, in our 2013 inspection, the operations utility staff noticed that this pipe was starting to degrade and was getting pin-sized holes into it. So with these holes, the water is coming out very, very close to where it's exiting the reservoir. And these holes just keep getting bigger. We went into the reservoirs in 2018 to clean them and inspect them. And the pin-sized holes were now getting to be larger than toonie-sized holes, some of them. So you can see how it's degrading over time. So we recommend that we complete the design of this project in 2021, and then come back at this point in time next year with a firm construction budget for 2023. That's the next time that we're scheduled to take the water out of the reservoirs, clean them, inspect them, and I'd like to replace these header pipes at the same time. When we do this, we have the two reservoirs. We need 45% of our volume for fire capacity legally from Alberta Environment. When we are cleaning one of the reservoirs, we have 47%. So, you know, we have our fire capacity, but we're all a little bit nervous when that happens, right? So we always do them in January, February when we don't have irrigation, when we have the lowest flows, but we don't want to do this any more frequently than we have to. So that's why I'm hoping to do the design next year. And then even if there was a failure in 2022, say, we would be ready to just instantly get these fixed. There wouldn't be any steps. And then in 2018, when we had it down, we actually went in there and measured everything out so we could do the design this coming year. So we're estimating the cost of design at $15,000, and it can be funded through the Water Utility Reserve.
Okay, seeing no questions, moving on to the next one. So the Southern Regional Stormwater Project. So Town Council previously approved Phase 1 of the Southern Regional Stormwater Project that would require the town to contribute 10%. Here's the funding schedule. Is there anything you wanted to add to this? Or?
No.
So in regards to the funding, we kind of looked at available funding sources for this project, utility rate adjustments, reserves. So the storm reserve, as of January 1, 2021, we'll have just under $1 million in it. Annually, we put approximately $225,000 into this project. So planned expenses such as the Molloy project coming out, Molloy Phase 2B in a year or two. That's the largest planned expense right now of $280,000. And again, this project, this regional stormwater, would be phased over 4 years. So with that being said, considering we are looking at utility rate adjustments for the wastewater lagoon upgrades, it's recommended that council approve the funding through the Southern Regional Stormwater Project through the Stormwater Reserve Fund with no utility rate increase specifically for this project. Further work regarding asset management and the scheduled implementation of the town's IMP is scheduled in the future. This discussion will align with the funding for the project as well. Again, such as how much funds do we have available to spend on these projects versus how much funds do we need to put into our reserves to continue funding these various projects into the future. So for the Molloy Phase 2B, total expected project cost is maintained at $3.1 million as in the previous year capital budget. Confirmed grants to the provincial and federal level of $2.26 million. Regional partnerships of the town of Coaldale funding of $560,000, leaving the town of Coaldale's portion for this $3.1 million project at $280,000. So there's no direction required from council at this moment. Rather, this is just an information update regarding a grant approval that has been received for this project. So before Andrea leaves us, was there any other questions on any of these projects council had?
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, the next project, put on my fire chief hat here, is the SCBA compressor fill station. So on the right here is the current compressor. The self-containing breathing apparatus fill station was purchased in 1995 and has a life expectancy of approximately 20 years. It should be noted that staff have been spending an increased amount of time each year in order to maintain the compressor fill station. With the recent purchase of the new SCBA bottles, which run at a higher pressure, it's necessary to replace the compressor and fill station to accommodate the high pressure and larger volume air cylinders. The current station does not meet the latest NFPA guidelines. By not meeting the latest guidelines, this could present a hazard to the firefighters who are refilling the air stations, or air cylinders, pardon me. So here's kind of a example of what the new station would look like. So they go into the compressor, door closes, they fill up. From what I've been told, that way with high pressure, if something was to happen and they explode, staff would be safe and they would kind of maintain the fragments from a possible explosion. So total purchase price is estimated about $48,000. Emergency Services has already secured the sale of the existing equipment for $8,500. Splitting their remaining price with our local partnerships, the town's portion for this equipment would be $19,750. This would come out of the fire equipment reserve, which as January 1 will have an estimated balance of $566,000. Any questions on this project? Okay. Moving forward here,
Russ, just a quick question on that compressor. Obviously, it can't be used as a backup unit, or another fire department wouldn't be able to use it, something to that effect.
I don't know the specifics on that, but I'm going to assume with the fire department looking to sell that, there is more benefit in the cash proceeds we could receive from selling it rather than using it as a backup or from another department. So with us, we have Russ Tanner, who is going to first speak on the furnaces at the community center.
All right, so there's 2 furnaces at the community center that are 30 plus years old, and they're not working very efficiently. We've actually had a full service done on them, and there's a number of components that are in poor condition. Corrosion is taking place on the heat exchangers, which means only a matter of time before they fail. So if approved, space temperature will be consistent with less requirement and failure not being imminent any longer. So the request here, there's some pictures. And so there's 2 units that actually service that space, and the reason why there's 2 units in there it is because of the space in the mechanical room. You actually could have serviced that space with just one, but we're not able to do that, so we would be replacing both in this situation. Total quote for furnaces was $33,261. We've created a little bit of contingency, but at $35,000, not much. We're pretty confident in the quote that was given. We'd obviously go out and make sure that we got a little bit of a competitive quote coming back at 2 or 3 different people. And the funding source for this would be community center reserves. January 1st, 2021, balance estimated at $105,685. So December 31st, 2021, the balance estimate would be $70,685 should this go forward. Any questions?
Or question to previous years, did the kitchen equipment is running safely and functions well? I think they put a new dishwasher in, and is there anything else that might need to be repaired in the kitchen?
I haven't actually looked into that myself, being new, so I can't confidently answer that. However, I do know that Terry is here, and Terry May has done a great job of looking after facilities prior to and in the gap we've had here. Terry, the answer was, how's the rest of the equipment at the community center in the kitchen? There was recently a dishwasher that was replaced. Are you aware of that?
I know we've had conversations about upgrading the kitchen at some times, but it hasn't really gone any further than that at this point.
Item at this time then on the kitchen. Okay.
No.
I can speak to that. I did talk to Cindy Hoffman a little bit that, as she did mention the possibility of commercial kitchen kind of style in the community center. We decided to kind of wait on bringing that request to council, just with the new projects coming, as such as the rec center and Civic Square with available rental space in there for the community. We kind of wanted to see how those projects shaped up in the rental of those spaces without investing more money into the community center first.
Thank you, Worship. Couldn't we look at using the curling facility kitchen rather than upgrading and putting two commercial kitchens right beside each other? Because my understanding is they've got the commercial kitchen already in the curling rink, which is right attached to our community center. So why would we need two kitchens? We can probably knock a hole in a wall and allow that kitchen space, because the town operates both facilities, just leases one out and rents the other one out.
Yeah, it's a good question to definitely consider and stuff like that, and kind of with those options available, that's why we decided not to bring that request to council at this year. It could be a future year request when we evaluate that option. Next project, we'll move on to parks with a piece of equipment.
Okay. As part of the 2020 budget deliberations, council did approve a parks tractor for the price of $60,000. However, it's being requested to increase that budget to $80,000. This will allow for the purchase of a new piece of equipment that will increase the park's maintenance and snow removal requirements and efficiencies. This equipment will have with it, should it be approved, a V-blade, sand and salt spreader, sprayer, and front-end loader. The equipment requested is an upgrade from what was previously planned, because the previous planned piece of equipment would have been less versatile on some of these required tasks. This is largely due to, or one of the major impacts is snow removal. And so the piece of equipment that we are proposing here is called the Toolcat. It's a Bobcat. Same components that exist on our other Bobcat equipment can actually be used versatilely between the two. If the funding request is approved, it will result in increased efficiencies and time spent on pathways and turf maintenance. The existing tractor is in high demand as well. We wanted to point that out. There's a tractor that does some of this work. It's in high demand, not just for some of these tasks, but in operations and other areas and other departments. And this new piece of equipment will relieve some of the demand and allow it to be used where it's needed. This type of equipment is more suitable for turf maintenance, and it's more versatile for year-round park maintenance. We certainly see this being out at the sports fields, the quads. So funding source is Parks and Playground Reserves, January 1st, 2021. Estimated balances $371,691, and so should this go forward, December 31st, 2021 balance after these funds are spent would be an estimated $291,691. Are there any questions?
Okay. Yeah.
Councilor Lloyd?
I guess that's something you're going to need for all of the new pathways that we've got, eh?
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. This piece of equipment, I know you saw a picture in there, and those were the only ones that we could find. We couldn't find one with the V-blade, but we're looking at getting an articulating V-blade where just the efficiency and how quick it can get through the pathways as opposed to a tractor with, a blade on the front is, in fact, we'll have to slow the guys down possibly.
Okay, moving on to the next project here. So we have the museum foundation repair.
All right. So the museum foundation repair. This project involves digging around the foundation of the museum and waterproofing the foundation walls, which have been that have several large cracks throughout. This will prevent the inflow water in high rain and flood times. This past July, the town did experience heavy rainfall, which leaked through the foundation walls in several locations, damaging one set of interior walls in the society's display area. It did have limited impact because we were closed, but in order to prevent further water damage and allow for repairs to the walls in the museum, the repairs are recommended or will continue to have leaking occur. Here's some pictures of some of the damage, some of the cracks that are existing in the walls. We haven't put back the vapor barrier in some of these locations because we know that it'll leak again, so we're waiting for that repair to take place. And so the cost estimate to excavate and install a barrier around the foundation, I want to point out that the quote that we got here, they've done a really good job of identifying not just putting the vapor, like not just sealing the foundation around, but also creating weeping tile and sump pumps and things like that to make sure that it's up to code and looked after for an extended period of time. Should council and the town of Coaldale want this building as an asset for any extended period of time past today, this is really the only way to truly fix this issue. The landscaping and contingency is so that portion of the project is $118,000. We've also allowed for $22,000 to go towards landscaping after it's complete, and some contingency there to bring the project to $140,000. So funding source, there's an estimated $105,000 in balance in the museum capital reserves as of January 1st. So should council decide to proceed, there is a shortfall of $35,000 just from that reserve, and finance has provided us with some options here. An internal loan, the $15,000 is allocated to museum reserves each year. It'd take 3 years to repay that loan internally. And or we could look at these three other areas for funding and reserves, one being the community services reserves, safety project reserves, and the mill rate stabilization general operating reserves. Any questions?
Councilor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure Councillor Pauls probably has a longer range of experience with the museum. Maybe he might want to add, but I know at the meeting last night with the museum, they would be really appreciative of this. And not only that, but previous presidents have had to deal with flooding, so this is not just a new phenomenon. So experience with previous flooding has really determined that this is a must. And the amount of hours that our town staff has spent mitigating this flooding, certainly grateful for it, but it's just an ongoing issue that is going to cost more money and time and labor. So the other issue that they've had at the museum, or still have, is mold and issue, and so I'm sure that's part of this whole problem, I would suspect.
Well, so should this project go forward, certainly the vapor barrier and interior would be investigated first and foremost. If there's any mold, we'll certainly have to look after that. That could certainly be looked at as part of that contingency. It's not in the current quote at $118,000.
I think the mold issue right now is kind of their primary maybe. Butch might want to add to that from the museum.
Part is in the native part of it, and that thing needs a whole lot of everything. And I don't know, you guys got, somebody came in and had a look and, yeah?
So because this would have been information prior to my arrival that I'm not aware of, I did go and have a look over there, and I would suggest that some of the, I don't know that there's mold, I didn't, but there is a little musky smell. I would assume that would have a lot to do with the years of seepage, but Terry might have more information for that.
That's,
The worst of everything.
and that section was the part you saw in the picture that was cut out, or the one right beside it there. So most of the material in that wall was rotted, so that would all have to be replaced. The reason it was kind of researched before is that placing that now will just continue to happen. So that whole wall and section would be rebuilt after it's sealed.
We're talking mainly vapor barrier subwalls, right? Structure.
Yeah, they would.
Not a major expense.
Not the whole basement, no. At least not in this quote.
Just maybe just that the mold is really a health risk, and I think that's where the Museum Society is really concerned. So I know they've had to plastic off, I haven't seen it specifically, but plastic off even Carmen's office so that there's not an odor issue coming up.
Building, to take apart all the displays there and pull all the walls off, no. Right, we'll have to get more information back to you, because I know that there was some testing done previously, so as to where that is. For sure, the section that was wetted down here there was a lot of mold there. So, but it looked surface to me. I'm not a mold expert, so I'll leave it at that. But there was quite a bit there because it appears to be leaking for a long time. So.
Councillor Simpson was first.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make sure before we put money into it that we're fixing the problem. So you think the mold just comes from the leak and there's no other mold sitting around elsewhere, correct?
Evidence that I could see when I went over there and looked, I would agree with Terry. That's what I kind of was alluding to, is it's surface mold. There was some rotting to some wood that I could see. Once you rip out that vapor barrier and replace that vapor barrier, you should also be able to get rid of that mold with a acid type base. I mean, we'll have to go online, but companies do provide the proper abatement for that. It can be done with staff, and I would assume, I guess, this wasn't an item that I was prepared to speak to tonight, but certainly we could look into that and probably come back to council with more accurate, factual information, and we could probably do that rather quickly. So.
Thank you, Worship, and that answered my question or comment. If we could have administration come back to us before we put $105,000 into this wall, and then find out it's going to be $500,000 worth of mold removal. What's the cost to get the building where it needs to be? Is the cost more than what the building is worth? Because everything has a dollar value, whether it's a museum or not. There's a dollar figure, there's a depreciation value to everything, and you can't just throw good at bad and think it's going to get better. So I would really ask if the administration can take a good look at it, bring a hard estimate to us of what it would cost, because this is concerning if the board is saying there's a mold issue and it's in offices, because those offices are on the second level, not in the basement level. So now it's really concerning that if we've got mold that's traveling up the walls into that main level.
And there is mold in the second level? I thought it was the office downstairs that,
The last display, it was okay. But then, right after that, then we got hit with that big flood, and so you can smell it coming up.
that for sure. We knew that there was an odor in an office upstairs, but we weren't, and that could be a result from what's happening downstairs. But we'll have a look and take a look and see what's going on, and we'll have a conversation with them to make sure that we're looking in the right areas for sure.
CEO Hastings?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just think before this matter comes back to council, we can have a test done and provide the test results to council so that it's done by an independent firm that specializes in this, because musky smell versus, mold, there's quite a spectrum there. So I think we'll just defer any determinations to an independent study, and before asking for funding approval for this, we'll have that along with us so that council can see what the true verdict of the situation is.
One other question I have with that, I would like that museum looked into very thoroughly during this for everything else, because I just don't want to put into this type of money and then find out we have to put another 100,000, another, right, within the next few years, 5 years, right? So see what needs to be done and what would the total bill be with that one.
$100,000 here and $100,000 there, like with the parking lot and, proper drainage out there that really, helped, with flooding issues and some of that. So it's an ongoing.
But did it help or did it hinder? Because this happened in July after the parking lot was paved. So to say the parking lot helped, that hindered, because that's what we got after we put $100,000 into a parking lot.
Side of the building is the excavation taking place again? Sorry?
Anything that's not the newer portions of the complete wrap of everything that's new, or old, I mean. The two pictures you had were both north and south of the building. The current section that's ripped off right now, it does look like it's had water before, not as much as was pouring in July, but it has had water in before.
For the quote, that there's 38 linear meters being excavated on the southeast side and 45 on the west north. So it appears the west north is the biggest problem. So.
Okay, we'll move on to the next project here. So Zamboni updates.
Okay. As part of the 2020 budget deliberations, council did approve to purchase a new electric Zamboni in 2021. The previous budget was $75,000 from the municipal source and $50,000 from an unconfirmed grant. An electric Zamboni will result in lower emissions, estimated $6,000 annual savings, both in fuel and in some maintenance as well, when we compare the current equipment. The current equipment is propane. So life expectancy of the equipment is 10 to 12 years, with battery replacement estimated every 5 to 7 years, which is $10,000. So we want to point out that cost too. The current equipment is aged and required consistent attention. Its remaining life is we're close to the end. It'll have 4,000 plus hours on it by the end of this year, this ice season. The previous estimated budget of $125,000 was underestimated by approximately $25,000. This also did not include the battery pack. The reason why you kind of have a second battery pack on here with these lithium batteries is just in case you, we know they have a lifespan and you don't want to get stuck on the ice, things like that. So There's a high likelihood that the town will receive the petition. I can tell you that there's an agreement that's been signed by us now, that in real time, and expecting to have it signed by Government of Alberta right soon here on that, and very likely that we'll get that grant. However, the grant is capped at 30%, which would come to a total of $44,919. With that, though, the Friends of the Arena stakeholders, the Coaldale Copperheads Minor Hockey, Coaldale Minor Hockey, Coaldale Figure Skating, we did consult with them about the potential of using some of the Friends of the Arena money that's been raised through the advertising agreement with the Copperheads. As of December 31st, 2019, there's approximately a balance of $105,000 that the town of Coaldale holds in trust for the Friends of the Arena group. After consulting with this group, they're all in favor of this purchase for the town of Coaldale. They like the clean energy and also what it'll do in helping our operational budget a little bit. So the adjusted funding model would be Friends of the Arena at $35,000, the grant funding at $44,919, and the arena reserves at $80,081. An estimated balance of $92,000 as of January 1st, 2021 would have us at $31,000 allocated to the reserve account each year. So, are there any questions? Yeah.
McGrath has an electric one. Have you talked to them at all?
I'm actually not aware that McGrath had one. That would have been a really easy thing to do. I've been out there quite often lately. And but we did, however, go to a demo on the actual model that is that we've put within this grant in Medicine Hat. They have this piece of equipment operating where the Medicine Hat Tigers play. I was going to say the Canal Center, but it's actually about to change. I think it actually might have gotten announced just this last week that it's been changed. But so we've seen it. We went up there. City of Lethbridge went with us. A number of other communities around southern Alberta went to take a look at this model Zamboni. Our Recreation and Parks foreman, Chad Glasser, actually got on the Zamboni and operated it for a little bit. We took our mechanic for the town with us to take a look at this, to confirm what we are being told, that it will be less maintenance, and it passed. They both asked me where they signed for it, so they were pretty excited about it.
I just wanted to touch base on the funding source. So like it's important to know that since budget last year, the estimated cost for this project, excuse me, with changing grant funding has increased by a total of $40,000. But again, the only additional ask from town council is $5,000, and I think it shows the good working relationships the town of Coaldale has developed with user groups. For them to say there was little, I think, discussion amongst them. They were all pretty quickly in favor of chipping in from the friends that are going to help out with this project. So that's a really good news story, I think, as well.
One question with that. Is the electrical already ran to that area for the Zamboni for plug-in for charge, or is that an additional cost above this?
No, so the battery pack is part of this cost, so that grant can go towards purchase of the piece of equipment and that battery pack, or the battery charge station, actually. And I'm sorry, because it actually couldn't go towards the additional $10,000 add-on that we'd like to do, and our mechanic said was pretty critical to do. But it went towards the quote we got for the machine that's just under $150,000.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thanks, Your Worship. I like the idea of not having fumes in the arena, that's for sure. Is there any value in the old Zamboni? Is there any resale value for it?
Yeah, sorry. So I should have pointed that out, that it's pretty key to always have a backup. We do have a backup that's much older than even this one. The idea and what we'd hope to do is just keep this in working condition as a backup, should something happen to the electrical one. And to answer your question, though, is it is very common that on Alberta Recreation Facility Personnel's website or Alberta Recreation Parks website, they do have a place where these Zambonis do go for parts, and or in sometimes some places they go to other communities. And so we certainly would fill that out. I don't know the condition of that current backup piece of equipment, but there's always an opportunity there for sure that we'd investigate.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. Just with that backup unit, then you don't need to build extra storage for that, or you're not going to be running it back and forth to the town shop?
Right now, there's actually another overhead door on the southeast side of that arena, and a pad and a space for that to be parked. So.
With no further questions on this one, we'll move to the next one, which is the slab repair for the arena.
Project was previously approved by council during the 2020 budget deliberation. However, this is being presented to council as an update on the project's readiness. And I actually just found out late this afternoon that this actually went out for tender today. So replacement of the arena floor slab scheduled to begin in 2021. We've scheduled it as such. Kind of the key of why we're getting it out right now is to make sure that we can do this during the off season, have as little to no impact as possible to the existing ice season and the ice season starting in 2021. So estimated cost is $1,020,000, and all the costing that we got prior to going out for tender would indicate that that will be under budget. So funding source is MSI, capital and federal gas tax grants. Are there any questions?
Maybe a question through to Kaylin, if I may. Since this was a budgeted item from last year, why wasn't it dealt with during the off season this year?
Through to Councillor Chavin. The time it takes to design, we don't want to risk tendering it prematurely and not have it done and then miss a couple of months in the off season. So the design process began so that we could tender it, so that as soon as the ice season is over, the contractor's been predetermined, ready to go, hit the ground running, because you only have between March till August. That's your window every single year. And it does take time to design and think through the logistics of these things. And so we didn't want to risk tendering this project, in April, May, and then have it spill into October, November, December, and then have the ice season lose a few months. So that's the primary reason. And I don't know if Russ or anyone else or Kyle wants to jump in, but we were just cognizant of we get one shot per year to do it. So
Just to add to that comment, this was included as a project for 2021 when we did discuss it last year. So the project isn't delayed or anything like that. It was always scheduled for the year coming up here. Okay, with no further questions. Thanks, Russ. So the next one here, we have a little area in the library. So library is requesting $10,000 to enclose the alcove area with a plexiglass structure and a door. The outcomes of this will be able to provide greater flexibility for the room area and more privacy for those using the area. So we have a little picture here of what the existing area looks like. So that would be enclosed again with the plexiglass and the door. Funding source would be the Library Capital Reserve. Currently, or as of January 1st, there's an estimated balance in there is $15,000. That's all the information I have. Councillor Simpson, did you have anything to add to that? I know you're part of the library board. Okay.
Yeah, there's really not much to add to it. It's just part of the plan for going. You can use that room for many different things if it has a privacy, such as tutoring and groups or anything like that with the privacy and the quietness, so they can be more talkative there, but still keep the quietness of the library.
Okay, with that being said, we'll kind of welcome back Terry and Justin again to talk about operations. So the first project we have here is the water meter addition for the Malloy South.
Council, yes, we've been requested by St. Mary's to have a meter for all the water that we use that comes from the south for the Malloy and the birds of prey. This is something that they're kind of doing across the board to keep better track of the water they're using. So what we're asking for is 20,000 for a meter of that size and for a vault, and we will put it in and have a place where we can keep that year round.
You just have on the screen here where the meter would be located as part of the Malloy.
At the start of the year, once the canal starts running, we go down and turn on the valve, but that little feed pipe, we're going to add a meter to. It's just a little bit larger than normal meters, so.
Okay, seeing no questions on this one, we'll move to the next project. So we just have an update on the streetlight phase, Terry.
Yep, so we completed phase one in the early 2020. We are currently about a week away from starting phase 2 and 3 out there. So that will take us all the way to about 12th Street from east, or from west to east. So it'll be most of the town at that point. So phase 1 was about 105,000. It got us 51 lights. Phase 2 and 3 are, like I said, from 21st Street east to 12th Street. It's going to add another additional, I should have wrote that down, but it'll be about another 60 lights, or 50, 54, 55?
Yeah.
You have the number there? Sorry.
30 for area 2 and then 34 for area 3.
So 64.
Yep.
So that'll be a total of 115 lights over the first 3 phases. This, as you'll recall, started out as an initial request for phase 1 to be all underground. We then brought that back with an option to go above ground, and which council approved where we could. And what that has done for us is allowed us to, for 222,000, put up 115 lights instead of the 27 we'd originally got quoted for, or originally had our first quote for. So the remaining budget that's left, once this year ends, we'd like to use for the remainder of the town to finish off the rest of the east and a little bit of industrial. And if I extrapolate the original quote for the number of lights to what we have, we've 115 above ground lights would be about 1.2 million. And now, so we've saved quite a bit of money to get more lights in town at this point.
That's kind of all we have from the operations department. So any questions for these two before they skedaddle?
For being able to include, increase the number of lights, and that, I think that enhances the community safety a lot, and getting good bang for the buck. So that's really exciting that we're able to bring more to the community for less dollars. So good work, all you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're entering the home stretch here, so we're almost done. We're getting to the conclusion here, and the accountant of me, this is kind of the cruel part, so make sure you've got your coffee ready and we're ready to go. So we're going to talk about projections here for the next few slides. So the first one we're going to talk about is municipal debt. So it's important to know that historically the town of Coaldale has had a very small debt level in comparison to its debt limit allowable under the MGA. I want to point out that having a low debt limit isn't always good from a financial aspect, is because if you have low debt, it could mean that you're not properly investing into your town's required infrastructure, right? You could have utility, roads, other required services that the citizens want that you're not investing in if you're not spending debt. Currently, it's kind of known that with everything happening in the economy, the town has the ability to invest in historical low debts. Borrowing limits, sorry. We kind of talked about the lagoon and the wastewater. 20-year debenture debt was under 2%. We're still paying off debt from 10, 15 years ago that were at 6%. So like it's a good time now to spend money because we're locking in super cheap interest rates for years and years into the future. So before we get into the slide for the projection, again, there's some uncertainty with how much exact debt is going to be needed for the lagoon upgrade. So I estimated about $3 million for this projection. It's just slightly a higher number than that was average between the 4 models. So looking at the column here, table here on the left. So the blue, we have projected municipal debt from 2019 to 2023. And the red is the debt limit here. So table following that on the right is the percentage of the town's debt limit that we will be utilizing. So you can see here, 2019 we're roughly over 60%. That's expected to drop a bit here when we'll be at approximately 58% in 2021. With the lagoon upgrades, we're back up to about 60% in 2022, and that's only going to decrease as we continue to repay that debt going forward. Any questions or comments before I move on to the next projection? Just want to highlight that municipal debt is not a bad thing if used well. It's a very strategic tool for the municipality, and the town has been doing that with the low interest rates. So going on to the next projection, another important thing is the grant funding. So each year the town receives annual municipal grants, MSI Capital and the Federal Gas Tax Fund, and the average allocation between these two grants to the town is approximately $2.1 million a year. So this is why the town has a large balance of available grants, as for a number of previous years. The town has saved a large number of these grants with the knowledge of these large capital projects coming up. That's why we're able to fund these large capital projects. So the annual MSI operating grant is approximately $265,000 a year, and that's included in our annual operating budget to cover things such as the handy bus, the school bus subsidy, and other various operation needs for the town. So the Alberta government has announced that MSI will come to an end in 2021-2022. It's going to be replaced with what they're calling a local government fiscal framework. Municipal funding under this program is tied to future provincial revenue levels. So the resulting effect for municipalities is kind of uncertain at this time as to future grant projections and what exactly the municipality will receive, as again, because it's connected to the Alberta revenue levels. So while changes are expected to municipal grant funding in the future, again, that's hard to project. However, there's no changes expected to the federal gas tax fund at this moment. Part of these projections and part of funding these capital projects, Town of Coaldale has allocated these grant funds up to the end of 2021. Due to the uncertainty, and no capital grants have been allocated past December 31st, 2021. So this is just kind of to show that we are spending funds that we know we're going to have. We're not hoping for additional grant MSI funding in future years that we're not certain as to the exact level that the town will receive for that. Any questions on grants before I move to the next one? The last one I kind of want to talk about is reserves. So again, reserves are essentially the cash in the town of Coaldale's piggy bank. So looking at historical here, we have 2014 through to 2019. These are actual balances. So 2014, you can see that's $10 million and increasing close to 16 million in 2018 with a drop in 2019 due to capital projects. So we wanted to break this out over a 10-year period here. Again, the orange is the historical and the blue is the projected. So again, as I kind of alluded to before, the town is putting more funds into our reserves each year, approximately 2.5 million, and we're taking less money out of our reserves for operating. So we're leaving more for capital replacement. So the projected reserve balance, you can kind of see it goes down and then up again. The decrease in 2021 there is due to the funds required for the lagoon, the wastewater lagoon upgrade. But the lowest we're projecting is just under $10 million, climbing back to almost 12 million in 2023. So when speaking about reserves, it's also important to consider capital investment because your reserves can be high, but again, that is not always a good thing because it means you're not properly spending tax dollars on your required infrastructure. So let's compare capital investment in Coaldale, again, for the same period for 2014 to 2019. So you can see in 2014 there was just over $2 million, increasing to 4 million, 6 million, and back down to 2 million in 2017. Coming in 2018 and 2019, you can see a much larger investment in capital into the town, that being close to 8 million and $10 million. If we continue the projection based on, again, we have the historic on the left in the blue, and we have the projected amounts in the green going forward, we can see there's high projected capital investment in Coaldale for the next few years. Again, it's important to consistently invest in your capital every year to avoid large fluctuations or whatnot. Again, though, part of the large increase is due to a new facility, the multi-use recreation facility that is being developed in Coaldale with the, again, expanding growth and population of Coaldale. So kind of this slide, if you can see here, there's a trend line there. And what the trend line does is it kind of averaged all the capital replacement previously from 2014 projected to 2013 for a 10-year period. If capital replacement was somewhat even for those years and steady, we'd be on this trend line here. So you can see kind of the items in blue, the required capital replacement, if we average it out over 10 years, has been under what has been required. And then for the next few years with the large capital projects such as the lagoons and the rec center, they're making kind of up for that. So again, the trend line, which hovers between about 10 and $12 million, is about the average there over that 10-year period. That's the last point I had on projections there. Any questions, comments from council before I proceed?
Just would like to see the same graph if we just took the rec center and the town square, the community or the town office off of there, because that would give us, I think, a more true projection of what our investment is into infrastructure and machinery, et cetera, because if we take those two big projects off, we're back to what we were in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So I'd like to just see what those numbers look like without that, just to ensure in my own mind, and I think to the public, that we are still investing in our community, not just investing in two specific projects. Thanks.
Councillor Chapman?
And Kyle, this is just a perfect picture of really how the trend to invest has been very prudent, mainly because we're going to be having to invest or reinvest and to replace, you know, as time progresses. And, you know, if we're talking about a second sheet of ice in the future, or even an indoor pool, you know, those kinds of investments will be part of this overall picture as we move forward. So I don't see this trend as, you know, taking a dive down, but at least holding a steady balance. And, you know, putting money into reserves, as you say, is really a secondary part of our investment process.
Well, I think that part of investment in some of our infrastructure, don't we do some of that through our operating budget, in the sense that we have money allocated annually for certain upgrades and continuous maintenance of alleys, et cetera? So it's, you know, some of it, you know, goes into the big capital projects of, you know, doing Main Street kind of thing, but, you know, interlaced in how the town spends money is also ongoing dollars that maintain and our existing infrastructure. So, you know, it would be incorrect assessment for people to think that we're ignoring the ongoing needs of our community at the expense of some of the other items as well, I think. But, you know, I think you've really brought up the game in professionalism in accounting for us, and projections, and how you, you know, illustrate the way the town's going, and that I think it gives a really good sense to the outside observers that the town's under your management has been well taken care of. And, you know, kudos to the corporate services division led by yourself for being able to do this. I'm really excited about, you know, the Questica software program that you're invested in too. And, you know, I think that brings a whole new dynamic going forward, that from what I understand, it can actually be used to enhance our public engagement in budgeting in that as we move forward as well. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So Questica is not only the Questica Open Book, it's from a budgeting accounting background, but as we kind of went through that demo, it has the availability to project and show the community a lot of cool and interesting facts about Coaldale and about budget and where we're spending money on. It's also can allude to other small things, like as, you know, with recreation, we could put stats as to how many different times the arena's booked for a year, or admissions to the pool for a year, right? So we could kind of see as the demand for the facilities in the town grows, and we can show that to the residents, there's also demanding for additional funds to keep these facilities going. So it talks about the dollar perspective, but it also brings the qualitative aspect to the data too, that just simply the financial statements doesn't always show. I just wanted to touch point on your point, Mr. Mayor, about the capital investment and the operating budget too. When I took these numbers, I just took them from our capital section of our financial statements, but you're absolutely correct. And like, I talked a couple times about the sewer lining program. That's $200,000 a year. But again, we've essentially doubled that program by not needing reserves this year. So that's more funds. That's an operating budget item, but that's more investment in the capital. As part of 2019 and 2020, just a reminder, council also did approve $150,000 towards the alley rebuild program. That is a program, an expense in our operating budget, but it is a capital investment as well. So it's important to look at both the operating and the capital side for the total investment in Coaldale.
A lot of work. This is, you know, being on council for the time I have been, this is really morphed into quite a sophisticated presentation, and that is not to be dilutive of any previous work, but, the methodology of how you do your work and that is, really gives a lot of clarity to how we can do our budgeting, and it is really helpful, I think, and I'm really impressed.
So just kind of moving to the end here, I just kind of wanted to touch base again to one of Councillor Holmes' previous questions was how much are we putting into reserves? Are we putting enough into reserves? So it's continual review of municipal revenue streams is important. It's important for council to consider small incremental increases each year. Whether or not, it's a small increase 1 year over year is a lot easier for residents to fit into their budget rather than large increases here and there. So even though council has approved 0 property tax increases in the past couple years, that was largely due to the implementation of the recreation levy. That's funding the new multi-use recreation facility. So part of the next steps here, we did have projections as to where Coaldale sits kind of regarding to property taxes, utilities, franchise fees, what small increases would cost, and the revenue would bring with the additional funds we could use to invest in capital infrastructure in the future. So kind of talk about the next steps here. This is the initial budget meeting with council, and we're not asking for any formal approval of projects. However, we just kind of want to get a little guidance from council what they want to see next. What projects do we want to include, exclude from the budget? Direction on establishing municipal franchise fees, municipal tax rates, municipal utility rates, and any other questions council may have after reviewing this data and coming back. So I have here that formal approval of the budget, we're kind of planning December 14th, 2020. And dependent on what council wants to do, it might be good to have a little time to, again, review this package, think of the information, review the projects. We can come back in a later meeting and kind of have council do the yay or nay onto which projects, which direction they want to proceed. And then once that's done, we would need a little bit of time for administration to finalize the budget document and then bring to council for approval. So we wouldn't need another special meeting by any means, but it might be good to have a budget update at another council meeting for council to kind of give approval or disapproval on some of these projects. So that being said, I'll kind of turn it back to council for next steps on the guidance of how they want to proceed.
Well, the only one that, if I'm recalling, it was that one FTE for the request isn't kind of anticipated in your projections already, is that right?
Yeah, the one full-time FTE was included in the projections. The only item here that was not included is the decision regarding the compost site. But again, from the direction from council, it seems like that addition to the budget wouldn't happen in the immediate future, as with more work requested on a firmer solution on that. So delaying that, what council wants to do on that won't have any effect on the draft operating budget.
So what you laid out before us right now basically is already envisioned in your projections for our operating income and expenses.
Correct, yeah. So again, right now the budget is showing a funding deficit of about $71,000. So again, council can decide to request that we reduce expenses. Is part of looking at the comparatives from 2020 versus 2021. We're updating our projected expenses every year so that they're relatively accurate. We don't anticipate a lot of fat in there. So if council said we want to reduce expenses In all likelihood, it would come at a reduced service level. So that, that can happen, but just keep that in mind. And again, the other options are to look at, various increases to revenue sources.
And we still have $500,000 in the mill rate stabilization reserve, is that right?
Yeah, it's approximately $560,000, yeah.
Thank you. Council Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. With everything you presented here today, how do you feel that we're setting up the success for the next council? Do you feel that they're going to be sitting pretty from what we've done for the last 4 years?
In looking at that, there's kind of different ways to look at that. So my job, when I look at trends and projections, again, for debt and grants and reserves, and we're also looking at the budgeting, how to put as much money into reserves as we can while maintaining proper service level for the town. If we're looking back at previous years and we're kind of looking at the trend is that we're putting more money into reserves. We're hitting off a lot of the large projects that were identified in the infrastructure master plan. And I say we're looking at putting more money into reserves and creating an efficient and balanced budget. The budget is reviewed pretty detailed every year to make sure we're operating efficiently. If there's areas that we need to address and look at where we can reduce spending and put that into reserves, we have. So council has, through their strategic direction, we're set up fairly well going forward. I do want to say every municipality has an infrastructure deficit in Canada. It's not common, and Coaldale does have one too. But the way we're looking at addressing it through our funding sources and putting more funds in the bank for future councils, I think we're on the right track.
Going forward is, I don't see a large amount of adjustment required from my perspective, and I'm kind of reticent about where we are still in the cycle and that, and anticipating, I'm kind of reluctant to necessarily increase too much along the way. I take your commentary about minimal increases so that you don't have to all of a sudden wall and forward and that, but I was just kind of uncomfortable in anticipating big increases in anything for the consumer might have to pay until we're a little bit further out of the COVID pandemic situation, but that's just me.
Just to kind of add from the administrative recommendation in looking at the current funding deficit and where we are. So we talked about minor adjustments to the utility rates for the Lagoon project that we'll have to reconsider in March. And looking at the comparisons and stuff like that too, the other two sources available to council are municipal taxes and franchise fees. And if council should consider those two options, I'd recommend just going back and looking at the comparatives to where Coaldale sits in relative to our neighbors and our competitors. Our franchise fees are quite low, and they don't think they've been updated for 5 years. Regardless to the tax rates were more in the middle ground, and they're looked at more every year. So just kind of our administration recommendation is if we're looking at making up that funding deficit, those would be kind of areas to look at and look at the comparatives.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and sort of thinking out loud for next year. I guess if we're looking at another COVID, season again, should we be planning for a deferral of utilities and taxes again, sort of using the same formula as we did for 2020? And just sort of plan for that, or rather than putting it into motion, but just plan for that?
Based on the results of those two, I wouldn't recommend it for next year. For the utilities, there wasn't a significant usage in the utility deferral overall. Given it may have had a small effect, yes, but overall it wasn't used as large. And looking at the property tax deferral, we did see that a large number of people did defer their property taxes, but when the September 30th deadline came, everybody, the balance was almost fully paid by September 30th. So what that tells me is, while the property tax deferral was a good thing, those who used it might not necessarily had fully needed it if it wasn't there, with how quickly we collected the balance at the deadline. So going forward, I wouldn't recommend that approach now.
Does council have any other direction or this discussion to answer Kyle's questions about further direction than that? And CEO Hastings is, Kyle, go ahead.
I'd just say, like, we do have it coming back in December. That's the tentative date for formal approval. If council wants kind of another quick session to talk about the projects and which ones are in and which ones out, we would need another added to another council agenda before that. So we just need a little guidance as to how council would kind of want to see that, because again, we don't want to rehash all the projects. We could put them on the screen and just say, is this one in, this one's out? Just so we have the ability to properly prepare for what council's expecting.
Councilor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. So looking at the whole budget and thinking it over, and the contingency that's built into all of these tenders and projects, all it takes is for one tender to come under, and you save that just the $70,000 deficit in one contingency, never mind in the project itself. So I don't think we really need to look at cutting a whole lot. I think we just need to trust our administration that when things go to tender, that, you know, that it's going to be awarded as they have in the past properly. And I don't think we're going to have to really worry about taxes or raising taxes or anything next year because of the savings we've seen this year. And again, with the situation we're in with tenders, they've been coming in considerably less than anything. You know, look at Main Street, for instance, how the savings were there. I believe that we don't have a lot to worry about. I, again, trust administration, and they've built enough into the budget that that 70,000 is going to be surplus at plus next year, whenever whoever is sitting at this table.
And your point's absolutely correct in that, yeah, we do have, it's very likely that these projects will come under budget by the 70 grand. However, that's more of the 70 grand deficit right now is on the operating side. So if those projects come under budget, the excess funds would remain in reserves and capital reserves. So if any efficiency or under budget from capital was pushed to operating, the effect is that we're funding the operating budget through capital reserves. And while that may kind of solve it this year, it doesn't, like if you have a $70,000 deficit this year that's not addressed, if it's covered off 1 year through reserves, you're always going to have that kind of continued on to the next year. So your comment about the savings is valid, but those savings would be saved for future capital projects and not kind of the operating account. As one of my mentors kind of explained to me, if we're using our capital reserves to fund our operating budget, you think of it as you're selling your house to pay for groceries, right? So that's kind of the thought there, is you kind of want to have that operating budget stand alone on its side without touching your capital.
let the shoe drop yet on what the current year is, and, you know, we may or may not have an operating surplus, and so I think we always have the ability to allocate part of that operating surplus to the mill rate stabilization fund and hedge future operating deficits going forward in that. So from what I heard, we only have like, you know, the questions on the waste transfer thing, and I don't think there was, just a couple more clarity points and the museum project were the only ones that kind of rang the bell for bringing more information back from the round table that I heard. Sir Home?
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I agree that that's on the capital side. One thing that I'd like to have a little more detail on, though, is on our operating budget. Like, we've got $5.5 million in contract and general services, and we haven't even talked about what any of that is. So if we're going to look at any potential cuts, do we just only look at these projects that we've, or additions? Do we only look at what we've looked at as far as more capital projects, or do we look at materials, goods, and supplies? You know, between the contract services and materials and supplies is $8 million. That's almost half of our budget that we really haven't had any details on this evening. So I wouldn't mind having a little more detail, even if it's just a quick spreadsheet on our contract and general services of every contract that's over $25,000 or even $50,000, just so we know what it is. How do we give that contract out? Is it, you know, just some details so that we at least have some idea of, you know, is gasoline for our vehicles costing us $500,000 a year? What are we looking at? We have no idea. So half of the budget we haven't even talked about here tonight. So I need some details on that before we put our hand up to approve a budget.
Specific to the operating budget in that regard.
I think I'm good with the capital side. I think we've heard the details, and I think you've done a fabulous job of telling us why, et cetera, and where the money's coming from and stuff. It's just strictly on the operating side, which is a big majority of our budget.
That's a fair comment. Thank you very much for raising that. So is that doable, Kyle, to just put a little bit more?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So I can put projections in there, what we think it's going to cost, and you can kind of see the difference there, because you may say, let's cut $1 million from this. Well, it might not be that easy.
That's exactly what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Even little things like snow removal. Anybody here know what we pay for snow removal each year? Or even, you know, it'd be nice for the public to know, what do we pay for policing? What are we expecting to pay for policing next year and the year after? Some of those type of things that come out of the operating budget that we just have to have some of those details.
So then if we can definitely bring that back at a later council meeting, and then council can decide which direction they kind of want to look at for the operating deficit. I just do want to kind of stress, if council does look at a mill rate stabilization reserve for, say, 1 year, that related deficit, unless there's a reduction of expenses, you're still going to have those expenses each year going forward, and you're just kind of solving the problem for 1 year and not going forward as well.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, and as Councillor Holmes says, if we can see the operation budget, it's easier to say, okay, rather than doing the mill rate stabilization, here, Kalen, take this back to your management and take 2% out. We're not going to do it, expect them to do it. Because, you know, it's not fair for us to cut it, but if we go and we can see if we need to, you know, if we decide we want to cut the $70,000 rather than increase the mill rate by, you know, 1, then, you know, I think it's only fair that, as Councillor Holmes says, we see that and then we can make recommendations after that.
Just to be clear, we're only looking for expenses. You don't need details on revenues, projections? Like say what we're interest or anything like that?
Any detail, just if there is some revenues that is gonna change, you think, over time, then sure, but if it's, I don't
It's
need to
fairly
know,
static.
I don't need to know that there's gonna
Okay.
be an extra, $200 in the fees for minor hockey next year.
Okay.
I think you had a robust discussion. I don't think you have a lot more direction than you had a minute ago, so thank you very much again, and anything else? Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to add one thing further to Councillor Holmes' question. I think it'd be fairly easy to provide this information for council. On a quarterly basis, we do provide variances on detailed department by department areas, different expenses. So we're already 3/4 the way through the fiscal year in terms of our financial reporting. So to extrapolate for the last quarter, in order to provide some accurate projections on the operational side shouldn't be, too much trouble for the next time that we bring this matter back to council.
From our CFO?
That's all. I
Okay.
think we're 12 minutes over, so. we're-
Okay, all right, so if that does it, then I guess we could entertain a motion to go into closed session then. Councillor Simpson makes that motion, all in favor? That's carried. With